Committee of the Whole meeting for December 6, 2021. Up we have discussions about Ordinance 0086, 2021, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a development agreement with Metropolitan Holdings for the Mill Street Apartment. And the purpose of this Committee of the Whole, it's special, is mostly to have a presentation and any public comment that people would like to make afterwards. So I believe the people from Metropolitan Housing would like to make a presentation, short presentation to start with.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen here this evening. We've prepared a brief slide presentation of what we hope to go over quickly this evening within the allotted time frame. It includes a very brief reminder of our company, our experience, and future vision here in Gahanna.
I'm sorry, could you state your name for the record, please?
Sorry about that. Joseph Mccabe, Vice President of Development, Metropolitan Holdings.
Okay, thank you.
It includes here a very brief reminder of our company, experience, and future vision here in Gahanna. A summary of the previous proposals, namely those in 2018 through early 2021, revisions into what has in some ways become a new project here in late 2021, our goals and objectives behind what we're proposing, an interactive dialogue of questions and answers. And to do this evening, both myself, Joseph Mccabe, here to speak with you this evening, Jason Pohl and Andrew Lemon, both here representing our interests as well. The history of Metropolitan Holdings goes back to 1998. We're founded, and when we were founded and headquartered here in Columbus. We're a vertically integrated developer, meaning we have development, construction, and property management all under one roof. We can ensure that the commitments made before you this evening are built and maintained long-term in a high-quality manner. That sets us apart from other developers who are neither local or don't have these affiliated functions. They have very different motives in their types of projects. We're invested in these much more long-term with having all these functions under one roof. The next three slides speak to our experience in building high-quality environments for the communities we serve and the residents who call our developments home. While not an overview of every project in our portfolio, these slides demonstrate that while several are located in the Columbus area, that each development varies greatly in design and type. Neighborhood and location matter, and that impacts our recommendation on aesthetic, form, and operation. In fact, in this image right before you now, Grandview Village and Peak are almost next to each other. The 168 units of Grandview Village are mostly along the residential streets, adjacent to single-family homes and embedded deep within the actual neighborhood fabric. The Peak property on the left, however, is actually next to some existing smaller two-story mixed-use buildings and a Kroger grocery store. Same neighborhood, yet different solution based on parcel location. While at first glance, these next two projects you see before you might not seem on the surface like they have many parallels for what we're going to propose yet tonight in front of you. But they actually do in certain regards. The out-of-town project shows that we can work with a municipality, particularly with a government office, to achieve a goal or an outcome they desire. Specifically in this case, it was for artist lofts and new market rate housing in the Franklinton area of Columbus. While far from the type of aesthetic we'd propose in Gahanna at this point, our continuing work with planning, economic development, and others to implement some additional ideas we have could involve the Gahanna Arts Council and others, and could really make something special or unique here as well. The Skytop project on the left is a project located in the high-income area, Anderson Township, just across the eastern city line of the city of Cincinnati. It recently started construction. This project removes an entire vacant strip center and plaza, which sat idle for years and was starting to create a rather negative visual impact at the city's Beachmont Avenue gateway. The new high-end resort-like luxury housing that we're building today has many parallels to the same issues that we find on the parcels here on Mill Street that are also sort of at a gateway to the city's uptown, downtown neighborhood. The last slide in our experience here that we chose here shows the Yardley, a very highly successful infill project on the Parsons Avenue retail corridor. As you'll see more yet later, its classic architectural look is more in line with what we envisioned for Mill Street. We get many compliments for two things on this project. Most of the people think that it was an adaptive reuse project because of its high-quality construction, the materials, and the brick choices that were made during design. Secondly, that the building is thought to be lower than it actually is. The top floors are pulled back from the facade, and it helps creates a lower building profile along the main streetscape. In the case of Gahanna, we also must remember, the 21st century is a golden age of personalization. People's living trends and habits are pretty different. Whether it's customizing our smartphones with our favorite apps or ordering exactly what we need when we need it from places like Amazon, we increasingly expect a unique customer experience, no longer a one-size model fits all. We are currently in the minority of developers because we also take that approach. One size doesn't fit all, as you'll find out this evening yet when we talk about our Gahanna project a little bit more specifically. This council has no doubt heard previous proposals about the project in a variety of settings and forums. To revisit every detail would probably take the next 5 hours. I'm going to refrain from doing that. Iterations included less units with more beds than more units, bigger sprawling footprints stretching all the way to Wilson Alley, vast amounts of new retail but with no commercial tenant commitments, which further creates lending issues, multi-level garages with no way to pay for them, and modern architecture that, while what I'd like to say is nice, shiny, and new, was simply out of context and really just didn't fit. That's not to mention the other complications west of Mill Street surrounding the impact of Lintner Park, the floodway, the deep, deep gaps, including our request to access a TIF, substantial fee waivers, and more. Fast forward to and come early to mid-2021, however, we started over with a new goal towards something more palatable, shovel-ready, and requiring less assistance from the community. A new project was in order not because it was easier, because it was the right thing to do. A new team gathered together to start over and craft a sustainable 74-unit project. We looked at what would be the minimum size needed to support full-time staff for management and maintenance, a signature hallmark of our long-term operations as an invested partner in your neighborhood. We explored additional financial tools. While we know affordability is a concern for some potentially here, we did realize quickly that to build a project like that would require vast amounts of low-income housing tax credits in an environment where already 1 in 4 projects can only be funded, creates further uncertainty about the project's ability to be completed, and additionally, with all the high-quality architecture we're proposing in this rendering, it would still leave gaps that would need to be filled. And not in the hundreds of thousands, but probably in the millions when you start to look at all masonry buildings of this size. It is not to say that affordable housing is bad, but in fact, other developments are currently coming online on the periphery of Gahanna that should help alleviate some of the housing concerns. And as you'll see here momentarily in a recap of the market, there is an unmet demand for mid-market housing, market rate housing, and luxury housing, not just one type. As part of the new project solution, we've resolved to being an all-residential project, which is what we at Metropolitan Holdings do best. In lieu of amenities to keep our residents internally focused, our goal is to connect our residents outward into the Creekside and greater Gahanna community. The full 5-story height has been revised to take both up less space of the footprint on the actual site itself, as well as to step and pull back the massing to give it a much more pedestrian feel along Mill Street. The modern architecture has been replaced with one of a more classical language with still lots of masonry. We've worked with city staff to propose creative alternative solutions for visually transparent corners, most particularly at Mill and Carpenter. This same design solution was actually employed in the Creekside development itself. However, we've taken it to a full 2-story heights to make sure we accommodate view corridors and passage of views at that intersection for larger vehicles like trucks and buses. We've committed to widening Wilson Alleyway and providing a new turnaround facility in lieu of the low-traveled portion of North Street that gets eliminated. We've still proposed an over $16 million project. However, the gaps are now much more palatable and easier to solve. With the mechanism for tax abatement already in place in Gahanna here, the real question comes down to the vacation of North Street as an economic catalyst. Now, you might ask, what are your demographics still, and how are those changing in our market? Well, the population, according to Esri, which Esri is every planner's best friend as far as a tool, because it captures real-time data, credit card records, spending habits, mortgage documents. It encompasses a lot of different things. Has picked up that the market area itself is expected to grow by at least 3,000 within the next 5 years. Over 27% of the population in the target market area makes over $100,000 annually, and another 39% makes between $50,000 and $100,000. The median age, however, is only 33, which is sort of really interesting when you think about the growth that's happening in this direct market. I would like to remind you, too, that while we often think about millennials as being younger, millennials this year turned 40, which puts everything in perspective. Notice, I know you can't really see it, but up in the top line, what Esri also tells us, though, about this market, what's unique, is that we learn about some of the spending habits and some of the patterns of the people in the market that we're trying to serve here, and that credit card debt is low, even less than the actual annual entertainment expenditures they're making. So this is a very desirable demographic for us. Out of the various subgroups that we analyze that would be our target audience for these types of housing, I'm just going to talk briefly about 3 of the largest groups that we target, or would be the target of our housing, that are found in your market already or in the periphery. One is the largest aspect or largest population segment. That's called bright young professionals. They're represented over there on the left-hand side, if you will. They represent 22.6% of the market, of which 57% of that 22% rent. They are consumers of the latest technology. They often eat out, but love to enjoy sports and outdoor activities. A place like Creekside would be an easy place for them to call home. The third largest group is called metro renters, another part of the market which is equally important. 79% of that third population piece rent and account for about 10% in the overall market. Typically, this population, or portion of the population, prefers to be located in 20-plus unit apartment communities in close proximity to offices, jobs, and businesses. That's, again, another important factor for siting such housing in the Creekside area. They have unique spending patterns, which includes even focusing down on the fact that we know they enjoy drinking wine at bars. They have shopping habits that match the available retail nearby at Easton. Mm-hmm. So we just start to think about the fact that if we can build housing that seeks out those kinds of retail opportunities, that eventually those things would hopefully still yet come to Creekside. If you build it, those things might come. The last or second largest population group of note, though, that we wanted to make sure we capture here is the savvy suburbanite. And, while when we look at them as a population makeup of the market, and while they mostly still prefer home ownership, almost 10% of them have incomes averaging $108,000 or more and have a net worth of over $500,000. Our key takeaway here is that 684 people in that population segment in the zip code itself of the project prefer to rent and not be constrained by home ownership. So of that 684 that prefer to rent, they're going to go somewhere else if they cannot find the housing they need already here in Gahanna. I'm going to turn over briefly here to Andrew Lemon to talk a little bit about the economic impact.
Just a tad taller, so I'm going to bump this up a little bit. Good evening, everyone. My name's Andrew Lemon. I am the CFO of Metropolitan Holdings. It's been a couple years since I've been here last, but I recognize a lot of familiar faces, and it's good to see everybody. So by constructing this project, outside a lot of the intangible benefits that Joe just recently described, there are a lot of financial benefits as well. And those financial benefits are outlined in the slide above you guys and you're looking at right now. And when we went through this analysis, we really wanted to focus on a 25-year period. And that 25 years represents the first 2 years, which is during construction, the next 15 years, which would be the tax abatement, and then the subsequent 7 years that follow. We just felt like that was a good time period to show everyone. And the financial benefits are really derived or really broken into 2 different components. The first component is the actual revenue that the city of Gahanna will get over those 25 years. And that revenue is driven by 2 things. That's the change in real estate taxes, which is primarily after the abatement runs off, and income tax. And income tax is broken into 3 components: construction income tax, leasing and management, that's our operations of actually operating the property, then the residents that will actually live there. The last component of the overall benefits to Gahanna is the actual discretionary income that we expect or we believe these residents will spend. The most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey said that the average American spends 6.3% of their gross income on food away from home and entertainment. With 74 apartments here, we're expecting that to be roughly $12 million over this 25-year period.
Lastly, we just want to touch on some of the objectives and the goals we have with the proposal. Really, our goal here is to revitalize 2 parcels that have been considered for redevelopment for nearly a half-decade or longer. Proposing an architecture that meets community goals and is well-balanced and well thought out, be financially responsible yet financially sustainable, 2 things that must be in connection with each other. Create a public-private partnership. More households in a location is a win-win for everybody, especially at this location. The de minimis vacation of North Street really outweighs all of the other benefits, especially the economic ones that we talked about. The future ability to engage with the community here is very important, including the Gahanna Area Arts Council, Chamber of Commerce, Creekside District Alliance, and others. We think we have things that we can put into the bricks and mortar architecture that will be very meaningful working with all of those parties. And really, in closing, what I did want to remind everybody sort of is the time is now. And you ask, why is it now? Because we're sort of at the end of a road here, and where this is probably becoming, either has to kind of move forward now or it may never happen. We're at a point where the sites must be either sold or redeveloped. The key item here before you tonight allows us that we as developers have certainty to spend a lot more money in finalizing our planning commission documents, design documents, and advance something through development and push forward rather quickly. And thinking about how to kind of close this out, what I did want to say is sort of, there was a quote I thought about from the great planner Jane Jacobs. She always thought that cities were said to have the seeds to revitalize and reinvent themselves if they let them grow. They also have the ability to let a city die if they choose not to let them grow and subsequently not change. In the case of these couple parcels, I think ideally we'd like to see something different happen. We'd like to see Mill Street continue to grow. We'd like to see a new gateway be reinforced on the end of Mill Street that could then be catalytic to spawn other development and investment. If allowed to proceed forward and voted upon favorably, potentially, for the development agreement before your consideration, this project would not be an if, but just a matter of when. Our timeline would put us back here in a matter of weeks rather than months or years in front of Planning Commission. And you already, we just want to reinforce that we're ready to advance this project and commit to making a change here in Gahanna. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Do you have questions? Well, mostly it's for the, we would ask public first, if there are any public comment first or questions from the public. Don't see any.
Done.
Okay. I have some questions. Should we ask for council? Council, do you have questions while they're here?
Yeah, I had a couple, I think, a clarification question from what I heard from the presenters tonight. Thank you, first of all, for coming down and speaking with us. I thought I heard you say all masonry. Could you explain about the construction? I know that that was an issue that came up the last iteration of this project.
It would not be a building of all masonry, but substantial masonry.
Okay.
The lower couple levels or lower couple stories would be masonry on the left-hand side with large masonry, stone portals. The 5-story, this corner element with red brick, that is all masonry. It would then move to being other, cement siding products and other things as it kind of worked itself around the backside. We would have yet to design the full backside, but that would be an architecture that would substantially match and similar context to what you see here on the front sides.
And from a construction perspective, I think the last time we had talked about this, it was wood frame on slab. Is that still the intended construction?
Yes. The only feasible, viable construction type out there right now is to do a wood frame construction building on slab.
What was your last question?
The construction type, that last time it had been discussed that it was wood frame on slab, and my question was whether that was still the construction type.
It is.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's still the most viable construction type for mid-rise buildings.
Okay. Any other questions tonight?
I think sorry, go ahead.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that presentation, really sincerely, and also thank you for your interest in investing in our city. A couple of questions. One is, could you go over what your plans are for parking? I'm sorry. This mask. What the plans are for parking, and elaborate on, in the developers agreement, you talk about the alley, and what do you need, or what's going to be done with that?
Yep. So our goal with parking is right now in the kind of the right-sized project we've proposed, because the project obviously was larger, then it was smaller. In this iteration of the project, we have proposed 74 units, and we have just over 70 parking spaces proposed on the site. Right now, we would be looking at an adjacent off-site leasing of about 4 spaces, potentially a few more. We would have that evidence of a lease in place during, prior to any seeking approval with Planning Commission of any type. But we really ideally are looking to at least get a 1-to-1 on site. We, as developers, are typically not able to consider on-street parking or other things in our counts, though we know they exist. In fact, we've done kind of an existing survey of a lot of the street parking that is around this area. And if I go to sort of the aerial here, the one important thing here is when you start to look at what is around here, there's a lot of surface parking lots that exist already. So between, a lot of the existing surface parking lots, there's several businesses that are smaller businesses that are to our east, in some of the kind of quasi-residential buildings that may have been converted over time, or other buildings. Those are, when those businesses shut down sort of at 5 o'clock till, again, 8 o'clock the next morning, you do get some availability of additional street parking. But our goal would be to accommodate many of our tenants right in the lot directly behind the building. Additionally, we have committed to the alleyway improvements on Wilson Alley, which then widens it by several feet to the west. We would turn additional right-of-way over to the city of Gahanna, be able to expand the alleyway and do additional street standard paving to widen that out. Additionally, what doesn't become so clear in here, but I know was in one of the exhibits provided to council in the documents earlier, prior to our presentation, is that there's a large T, what they call a T hammerhead, if you will, that allows for full maneuverability of a semi-truck or very large vehicles to be able to make a turning radius and do a complete turnaround at the end of North Street, where North would then terminate or end at the alleyway. So it facilitates, a lot of movement. It doesn't impair any existing businesses. In fact, With that would probably actually lead to a lot more vehicles, delivery vehicles sort of moving off of Mill Street, which would be great. It would mean that our development would cause no impact, but it would actually be beneficial to the surrounding business owners as well.
And you answered my follow. You answered my follow-up question to that as well, so thank you. It's all at the developer's cost as part of the project, right?
That is correct. The widening and the T-shaped turnaround that we're proposing to incur on our end.
Beautiful, thank you.
Currently, the only real incentives we've asked for is the access to the abatement, which you already have the mechanism in place for here, and what is essentially the vacation of North Street for the economic benefits and the other benefits we've outlined this evening.
Have you decided on a mix of, like, would there be 1 or 2 bedroom apartments? I didn't remember. Thank you.
There would be roughly about 42 one-bedrooms, 10 townhomes, and the rest would be 2 bedrooms, which would be about 22.
Are there any retail? Any retail?
There's no retail.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any amenities, swimming pool, physical things?
So in this case, with doing the smaller project, what we've really thought about doing was, in conversation a little bit with the Economic Development Department here in the city, is to really, instead of duplicating things unnecessarily, is try to put the heads and beds in the right spot, which is adjacent to other things that are happening. You know, for example, there is a small fitness gym right across the street from us. There are other amenities in the greater Gahanna area. We want residents to not use sort of a, if you will, stay internal to our development and use a free fitness center when they can go out to a local gym, and it helps inspire people to go seek the additional benefits if we're just in the right location. You know, some of our other developments, we have, you know, complimentary coffee bars and those kinds of things. We've even taken some of those things out of our project purposely to minimize, to help connect people to businesses. And one of the things we do with some of our residential programming at our current properties is what we call a Metro Perk. A Metro Perk is where we actually work with retailers one-on-one to set up some benefit. So say it may be 1 month in their packet with their rent reminder, they're going to get a coupon for, say, 10% off to go try a new restaurant or bar. They may get a coupon for a buy one, get one gym membership. You know, there's a lot of things that we do, and we have about 70 or so different partners we work with on these Metro Perks. So we think that there's an opportunity here to partner rather than unnecessarily duplicate.
Thank you.
If I may follow up on that as well, we looked at an analysis as to the proximity to the existing city pool, to your question about having a swimming pool. Given the demographic that this apartment would be generating towards, we could anticipate having, from a walkability standpoint, within a 15 to 20-minute brisk walk of our utilization of our trail system to get residents from this space to our existing city facilities in the area as well.
Any other questions? Oh, okay, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure, I guess, who these questions are best directed towards, if it's the city attorney, if it's the administration, or if it's the developers themselves. But I do have a number of questions, but I want to preface it first by saying I think contrary to popular public opinion, this body, council anyway, does not necessarily pick and choose individual developments. We don't decide whether it's a Wendy's or a McDonald's. We don't decide whether or not it's a Dunkin' or a Starbucks. Typically, things only come in front of council for a couple of reasons. One is either rezoning or there's a request for something of value. I don't believe you guys are requesting a rezoning, so I guess what I'd like to have known or stated for the record is what is the extent of the thing of value that is being requested of council.
From a development perspective, Councilman, the value that's being proposed here would be the capture of, well, quite candidly, what the council oversees is the vacation of North Street, so that would have to come back at a later date. So that would be one element of it. The ultimate value of this proposed project would be the inclusion of taking what depending on your viewpoint, a modestly abandoned former office building of EMH&T and a partially dilapidated now plant library facility, and revitalizing those key parcels along our Main Street corridor into a meaningful development that has 74 units of 100+ new residents to the city, that provides value through net new income tax generation for those members, as well as future land-based property tax improvements compared to what's currently there today. I think in the ROI that I shared with the body last week, I had in that part of the analysis what the existing land values were versus what the projected land values were. So that in itself has a public value benefit to it, given the improvement of the overall sites themselves.
So just to touch on that, is the extent of what's being asked of the city. And again, I guess what I'm trying to figure out here and make it abundantly clear
Sure.
for anybody that might be in the room or watching online, is there any transfer of monies being asked from the city to the developer in this case? Is there any TIF reimbursement that's being asked or anything like that? Any costs associated with utility relocation, either explicitly asked for or implied down the road?
Sure.
If they start moving dirt and realize, oops, sewer doesn't handle the volume that we anticipate with this particular
Sure.
building, is the city on the hook for any of that? I want to basically constrain what the ask is, or I want to know what are the constraints of the ask.
Absolutely. So the two asks that are on the table as it relates to this development agreement are the consideration for the pre-1994 CRA tax abatement valuation that this body has the ability to, in sense, it's not even, I hate to say it this way, but it's not even approved. It's just, it's an entitled encumbrance there, given its status within the Ohio Revised Code. The only ask of this body is the conveyance of the partially vacated portion of North Street,
Okay.
and what value this body puts on that partially vacated portion of the road.
Perfect.
That's it.
I have a couple more questions that I think fall into the category of once bitten, twice shy, and this is not meant to in any way, cast aspersions upon the applicant here. Before certainly my tenure, there was a rezoning that occurred on Hamilton Road where I think the council or the city at that time entered in thinking they were going to get a certain project, and there was a transfer of property, and through some loophole in the zoning code, and ended up with something very different. What can we do with respect to this development agreement to make sure that what is being presented here is precisely and is the only thing that will go on that property, and that it is not transferable to another party? Are there ways to put those constraints in the agreement?
Quite frankly, I would look through the lens of the revocation clauses that are tied to the vacation of the lower portion of North Street, and have that held up until a point at which Planning Commission has approved the project to a degree in which this body is acceptable to it, at which point then you can move forward with the vacation process. That would come through Planning Commission first. I believe Mr. Blackford, that's correct? Planning Commission reviews vacation first?
Okay. All right. I have my
I'm getting a
colleague
head nod
whispering in
no.
my ear saying it's in there.
There's clawback language in the development agreement that basically would allow for the development agreement to be clawed back if, again, the project isn't feasible without the lower portion of North Street, Councilman.
Okay.
And so the ability to claw that out and would make this project financially infeasible.
Okay.
And I will note this as well. One of the challenges with this project that my office has worked with Metropolitan Holdings regularly on is trying to figure out if we do need to vacate that lower portion, or could this be financially feasible in different segments or shifts. And unfortunately, given the scale of the site where EMH&T's former building is, you would create an orphan parcel if you were to do that. The ability to meaningfully redevelop that corner site into something that was having of impact, going back to your earlier comment, would be greatly impacted if we weren't able to combine it with other neighboring properties in this manner. So that was the reason why that is kind of the linchpin of this project, quite frankly.
All right. Thank you. That's all for me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I had one question, and I asked it the last time, and did you think about leaving North Street open and just building up and over it? Excuse me, is that?
So the issue for us is then that gets into a fire rating issue. If vehicles or whatever, if you ever had a vehicle parked underneath it that then caught fire, it becomes an issue. We'd end up having to hold it at least 2 stories in the air, and the amount of expense just becomes too much of a scenario.
Okay.
We can't bridge the right-of-way for that length without getting into steel and concrete construction, which just starts to make the project infeasible.
Okay. Any other questions?
this might be a better question for maybe Mr. Strum or the administration. But I recall last time this was in front of us that we discussed some concerns that Tiltons had about the vacation of North Street, and I wanted to make sure that we had been in touch with Tiltons. And
So I actually spoke to, I believe, the son who's a broker in the marketplace. They still expressed their concern about the vacation and their lack of visibility on Mill Street if this project were to come forward. And they had asked about potential disposition tied to the vacation. I encouraged them to actually either attend this evening or attend tomorrow morning's forum at Cafe Creekside with yourself and Mr. Renner to review that as well. I know that was shared in somewhere in the social media spaces that you were hosting some activity tomorrow morning.
yes, thank you.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I believe some of the neighbors that voiced concern also said that they would be favor if they could get bought out. So I think that was, we have emails to that. I'm paraphrasing, but their concern,
made that-
their concern was they weren't being made part of the project at the time. So I think, again, if this one falls, somebody else might look at them, so.
I made that overture to the gentleman who called my office earlier today in a similar question, quite frankly, Councilman, and I was told that that was not of interest at this time, or at least for that project,
Right.
and that property in particular.
I would just say that at the time, we had emails to that. The sentiment of the email was, I'm against this project unless you buy me out.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and presenting. Last call for public. Anybody have questions, comments? Okay, then we will adjourn this committee of the whole. Thank you.
Oh, we got another item.
Oh, we have another item, I'm sorry. Okay, let me find my agenda here. Thank you for reminding me that. Okay, next, ordinance 0077, 2021, ordinance to amend chapter 135, Department of Public Service and Engineering, the codified ordinance of the city of Gahanna. And I don't know who's speaking with this.
I'm sorry, my iPad is not working, nothing is working, so would you please?
Nancy, I can start the conversation on this. There was an ask with regard to a review of the purchasing structures and the rules that exist within our ordinance, specifically under Chapter 135. I think, Karen, you had some questions about this. And there was an ask of Crystal to draft some language that would effectively reinstate historical language that had been in place for quite a long period of time in an effort to promote transparency in the processes of expenditures of the city, and to manage that effectively through the council procedures. That is the item that is on the agenda for committee this evening, and part of this was to have discussion here within committee prior to it potentially going on as a first reading and coming back to committee at the next regular meeting, committee of the whole.
Yes, and I asked that we looked into a thing where my particular points were that anything above $3,000 needs to come to the city council to say yes or no on it. Now, obviously, that can change too, and I think now it has $10,000 in it in terms of plans and things like that. The worst thing that can happen to a member of city council is that you're sitting with somebody that is a resident or someone in a business, and they say, oh, I understand you have a $100,000 plan. And we know nothing of it. So I'm thinking that has to come out, because what we want to have is to be able to collaborate together and be part of everything that's going on here. Because this is not, city council is not just here to say, oh, you have something, okay, oh, yes or no. We're a part of this, and we work so much better when we're working together, and we know what's going on. So my ask was that we say, hey, listen, you have your budget, whatever, and you have monies in there, but if you're going to spend over $3,000, we should know that. or
that
5,
was-
or 10,000, or whatever we decide is a good
A
time.
reasonable dollar amount.
And that's mostly for planning and et cetera, that happens. So I'm bringing it up because I think we need to be, in these days, which are quite unique, with the bad word of inflation, and then we also have, a year ago, we were, the whole nation was energy independent, and we had a great economy, and those things are kind of all now in a mix. And we know there's COVID-19 was something that we hope will never happen again, however it continues. And so we need to move on, and I think we can get much more done if we have a greater view of everything that's going on. And I'm talking about myself, but I hope my colleagues will agree. We need to be a part of all this, not just the ending part, saying, oh, you have everything done, because we need to be part of that.
Okay. Other comments? Yeah.
So I'm still trying to catch up and come up to speed on this. Is the request about professional services? And are we going to limit to that, or we're not, certainly not talking about POs for if they need to go to Staples or anything like that,
Yeah.
right?
It's $10,000 limit
Yeah,
is what-
Professional and personal services.
and looks like purchasing requirements of $10,000 or services.
Well,
There's
I don't
two
know
areas.
what you can get for professional services for 10 grand. I mean, I guess there are, but that's not really the point. It's still.
You're right, it's not the point.
Yeah, but it's low compared to the general practices around Central Ohio. New Albany has 100 grand. I probably would be interested in talking about that, but I'm not interested. Nowhere in charter does it say that my job is to approve POs.
Actually, I'll counter that because Mr. Malarkey has to bring any professional services to council.
And that's what I prefaced with, are we talking about professional
Well, as I
services?
said, that's in charter. I mean, yeah, I think it's just professional services. So
Okay.
it's item 6 on page 6 of 8, and then there's purchases here, purchasing requirements. And again, I would agree with purchasing equipment and those kind of things. Like I said, you can't get a car for less than $10,000. We're not, I mean, we know what our squad cars and those kind of things cost. So, you know, maybe that limit there, but again, there is precedent in the charter for professional services. Yeah.
Right, so we're limiting this just to professional services.
The current one has 2 spots, purchases and professional services. So, but again, I agree with the purchases seem a little low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I think what was done, and again, I didn't write, this isn't my author, was a draft of language that in the first intent was roughly 2 administrations ago, there was an exception placed, a blanket exception for all professional services. And I think this is a means to correct that, to incorporate council's input. And then additionally, the question of the language. The ask this evening is, as I understand it, is not for this to be voted on, or et cetera, in meeting, but simply to have this initial discussion, have it introduced, and come back to committee at the next meeting. At that time, all of the detail, which obviously was in the agenda, to be vetted for any adjustments to language and potentially the dollar amounts. Again, I think Ms. Angela had mentioned that the initial interest was as low as $3,000. In my conversation with Crystal, I did ask that it be adjusted to this number just as a kickoff to this process. And it goes whatever direction that council as a whole thinks is appropriate.
So I'm sorry, just for clarification, are we talking about like if the Public Service Department needs to replace a plow blade and they have to bring it through because the way this is written, I would understand this to say that any piece of equipment that's purchased by the city would need to be through a full legislative process. Is that not the intent?
Well, I think we should be part of the discussions. We haven't not been part of the discussions for some time. And in fact, tonight is a little different because I think that maybe some of the people in the audience might even think that this is the other metropolitan place that was going to be done, and this is really a whole new plan. So I just think if we work together in collaboration and know what's going on face to face, it is so much better than trying to read a sentence or something when we are on the side of making our city, the great city of Gahanna, even better, and we are wanting to be successful in everything this council does as well as everything the administration does. And the whole point is, if we don't work together, things are not going to work out as well. And I think that if we can get to the point where I don't have to be surprised at a $100,000 plan, that to me, my next 2 years will be worth being here. Sometimes we just sit here and just all we have to do is say yes or say no. And it's just, I think we need to just know that there's some angst to that, when indeed we have gone through, all of the things that you need to do to become a member of city council. And finances are one of them. And so why not share everything with us, and so we can then congratulate anything that happens at the administration when we've been part of it.
Mike?
So this particular agenda item, apologize if there's been any discussion about this prior to this evening. I'm seeing this for the first time, so I'm very similar to Councilman Renner. Perhaps I'm playing catch up here as to what are the implications of it. But I'm wondering, just as I'm kind of digesting the discussion or the conversation here this evening, if maybe a more targeted or surgical approach isn't perhaps more appropriate. As I'm just reading the section, the red line area under 135.04A, it seems to apply to public service and engineering. I'm just looking at our budget that we have in front of us under capital maintenance and capital improvements, and there is a laundry list of items that exceed $10,000. I don't know that any of us want to be in a position where we need to approve every single traffic signal or police car or radio equipment and so forth and so on when it comes time to expend those dollars. And I would just add, I guess from a more qualitative standpoint, in addition to the budget, we also see a lot of these large ticket items that have to deal with capital and the capital needs assessment, which is also included in your budget document. So it isn't like we don't see this stuff multiple times before authorizing it. So that is a very long-winded way to, I guess, kind of express some concern with particularly the red text under 135.04A as to whether or not it is even necessary.
The question with regard to this section being necessary, your review, at least on this first pass, is that the items here are already covered elsewhere?
Yeah, I suppose the broad question is from a mechanical perspective, how would this legislative change actually operate? Again, if we've already budgeted something, we've seen it a couple of times, when it comes time to spend those monies, does the administration have to come back and say, we're ready to expend these monies?
So if I may, if you recall that we, on an annual basis, as an example, receive a request from the administration for the purchase of salt. So that is a standard process of an acquisition or a purchase that is completed that is outside of the budgetary process, where we budget funds for a spectrum of things at a broad level, but is a follow-on requirement of the item coming before council. In addition, we approve requests to go to bid. There is a whole spectrum of things that are appropriate and fit within the realm of council. At the same time, there is an item or there are items with regard specifically, and I think the main focus here is potentially to professional services, but it is to the pursuit or the expenditures of funds that are for specific initiatives, whatever they may be, that then are not coming to council for significant dollar amounts. And whether it's, if the focus is under the 10,000 amount, again, I don't think, from what I'm hearing, that's where the focus is. But it's really the objective of council's input to actions that occur within the city.
Can I follow up to that, Madam Chair?
Sure.
I guess in another way, I guess my concern here is how necessary is this? And again, I'm not referring to the contract services. I'm specifically referring to, as I interpret Section 13504A, it seems to be, again, what can I think be appropriately described as, in many cases, regular and routine items that we will have seen multiple times. And so it just seems like if this change would in effect mean that the administration has to come back and show for what would be, in essence, a third time. We're talking the CNA and the budget. I mean, there's line item detail in here about what these monies are going for. It just seems superfluous. It seems like it may not allow for, and it just seems excessive, if I'm interpreting it correctly. If I'm not interpreting it correctly, please, clarify. But $10,000 for regular and routine items that are done every single year, it just seems like an unnecessary add. And again, I go back to, it's in the budget, it's in the CNA. We all appropriated it when we got a good look at it, when we did our homework, the first two times. What's the necessity to have it come back yet a third time?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I looked and I didn't see it.
It's harder in these rooms. I really have to concur with my colleague, Mr. Snetzer. I don't understand at all why it's written in the draft language in 135.04A. The other part under 135.05 does seem to be congruent with what you were talking about with professional services. So I know this was an initial stake to start a conversation, but I don't want it at all in 135.04. And I still think in 135.05, the number is far too low. We go through really detail with our budget reviews. We talk about, a lot of it is high level, what the initiatives are. And then in the back of the budget books, there's an appendix for contract services. We haven't had an issue before. And so I'm just curious, what is really driving at this?
Madam,
Jamie?
Go ahead, Karen.
I think that council members need to have a better, I think we should be given the respect that we know what's going on in the city in everything that is here. I mean, we are a major part of what happens in this city. And I think that respect is one that needs to be done, and it needs to be done that we know everything that's going on, and we're going to be asked to then vote on at a certain point, or that in fact we have we know we have a good financial person here because we've won awards, or she has won awards over and over and over again. So we know that that's a good thing. But when we don't know that $500,000 has been spent, I have a problem with that. And so if you bring it down a little bit, maybe then we can get into a thing that personally, I think things would probably go faster. If you have one day, you're just sitting there and you say, okay, this, and this, okay, we got it, we know about it. not just reading something that's already done. All right, because that's what we are getting, and we thank you for that, Mayor, by the way. But that we, it's already done by them. So I think we need the respect to be able to be part of everything. And we're going to have 2 new people coming in here, and I want them to feel that they also need the respect of what has to be done. I've done this a long time, and we've always had an amount of money that typically we would, and I remember the $3,000 thing for a long time, but that was many years ago. So I just think it would be better for all of us to feel that we are part of this community, of government.
All right, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you. 13503, the existing code shows 13503 point, let's see, it is B, very first line, again, they talk about for auditing purposes, a $3,000 item, which may be where that number came from. So, I mean, that's already in part of this code. I would agree with the purchasing. I mean, we've got requirements for bidding certain things. I mean, bidding, you know, the permission, or not permission, but, you know, a request to bid a roadway project, those kind of things come to us. So I would agree with the purchasing, probably the limit is a little low. As far as things that are in the budget and things that are in the CNA that we've seen and heard about for years, I can remember when Mr. Jones told us that we needed entry features at both ends of the city, and they're still not built. We appropriated money, and it didn't get built. And for years, we asked what happened to that money, and, you know, Joanne says if it doesn't get built, you know, if it doesn't get built for that project, it goes back in. Just this year, we had Parks money that didn't get spent that got transferred to, I believe, economic development. And again, that's not what it was intended for when the budget was done, and so they came back and asked for it. There are things that come up. There are times that we pivot, we change. We heard Joanne say last year, you know, we were able to, because of COVID, change and pivot and move money around and not hire people and not do things. There's things that didn't get done in the budget because of that. But again, I think to Karen's point, we're not hearing about a lot of those things, and we'd like to be part of those decisions. We appropriate the money. That's what we do. We are in charge of the purse. That is our job. That is what council is here for. So again, I don't think it's unreasonable to be asked to be part of the process, part of the, you know, part of the decision-making process. There are things that show up in the CNA year after year after year that show up in the budget and then don't get done. Like I said, that the entry features, you know, again, we heard that the Hamilton Road Bridge last year had to be done because ODOT was going to redo that whole bridge. Nothing's happened to that bridge. Not our fault, but ODOT, you know, again, but the timing was there, and it had to be done emergency and waiver and bike path across that bridge and the new art on the bridge and all those kind of things. And it doesn't, so again, we put it in the budget, and then nothing happens. I think, to Karen's point, what happens to that money that we put in the budget that doesn't get used for those things that we earmarked it for? And there has been some items that, again, money gets moved around, whether it's, you know, it's just a general, if we give money to a department and say it's just for general use, and we haven't specifically earmarked it, it gets used for anything, and that's not being fiscally responsible for us. I mean, we're not doing our job. Again, my personal feeling. So, again, I can see where the limit under 13504A would be. Again, I think that limit is a little low, but for design services, I think it's appropriate. Again,
It's for conversation.
yeah, I mean, just start the conversation, be included in it. I mean, we've got, I mean, just last year, I mean, there was $30,000 for a brand refresh. Did anybody know about that in the budget in 2020? I mean, we know there's a $15,000 brand refresh proposed in 2022, because that's the first time we heard about it. But $30,000 got spent last year, and we didn't know about it. And Karen and I got invited to lunch, but that's the first time we heard about it.
So you
The
know.
person was already hired, and the study was already done, and we got the results of that study. It was a $30,000 study that council didn't know about. And it looks, from a couple of you, 5 out of the 7 didn't know about it. But Karen and I got invited to lunch to hear the results. So that's a great example of something that was not in the budget in 19 for 20 or for 20 to 21, but got done instead. So I think it's a fair ask that we want to know how money's being spent. So,
Okay,
So I think the ask is clearly there's some discussion, I think, on the topic. The ask is simply for an introduction and have further discussion within committee of the whole next week, or, yeah, next week, for the appropriate path, whatever that may be, going forward.
So you want to put it on for introduction, first reading tonight,
Yes, and then come back to committee.
and then no
see where it
decision made?
goes. Correct.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wonder if it might be appropriate to have our finance director talk about the interfund transfer process. And then there was a comment made by Councilman Leesburg about some things being moved around. Do you want to speak to that, Joanne?
Sure. Appropriation transfers are very common. Most municipalities, you know, it's a fluid budget process. As you mentioned yourself, things change. So when we entered the year, it was based on what we knew at that point in time. When things change and we discuss with departments funding that they may no longer need for whatever reason, we might have another department that needs it. It all stays within the same general fund. It's just moving it from one department who no longer needs it to a department that now has a need based on changes that have occurred during the year. And those are brought forward to you
Right.
for approval. I can't do it without your authorization.
For interdepartment transfers,
Pardon?
for interdepartment transfers.
Any appropriation transfer.
Right.
But I could only
From
transfer
department-
within the same
From department to
fund.
department. But inside a department, you could change the project, and if it doesn't change departments, you don't bring it to us.
I can move up to $3,000 between series of accounts. Above that, I have to come to you even if it's in the same department. So if somebody wanted to move something from contract services to salaries and benefits, I would have to come forward and ask your permission to do that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Oh, sorry, you have a follow-up. Go
If I
ahead.
can jump, I just wanted to finish the thought. And again, this is, I guess, a question for council, if they think it's appropriate to perhaps request input from the city attorney or the administration for how they see the mechanics of this unfolding. That's a big sticking point for me. It's just, again, from a mechanical standpoint, how's this going to work if this moves forward? I don't know if you all have had enough time to take a look at it and weigh in.
And that was actually, I'll piggyback on that. That was my question too, is just making sure that the city attorney had an opportunity to sort of review and offer opinion on this maybe before it goes to first reading.
No, I haven't. This got put on Friday at 8:30, and I was never sent a copy, so I was just made aware of it on Saturday that this happened to be here. No one had asked my opinion on it. Just looking at this as I started looking over it this weekend, I mean, if someone wants my opinion, I think that Section 13503 is violative of the charter. Frankly, you cannot say that except as otherwise provided, the Director of Public Service and Engineering shall have the exclusive authority to purchase and lease all goods. The charter in Section 3.04 grants that authority to the mayor or her designee, so she can designate someone else other than the department. So that's violative of the charter. Not the part about professional services, I'm not sure, I'm trying to hear, and I'm not really sure what people are trying to say here. I'm happy to help you all, get you guys what you want. I don't think this is saying what you want, because if you want professional services in there, are you limiting it to just the Department of Public Service? Are you asking, I mean, you can't do it for me. I just checked the charter. No, I have the full authority on who I'm going to hire for professional services and I don't have to come to you guys and ask you. You have to approve a certain amount of money I can spend on professional services, which you do through the budget. But I have the complete authority to determine who that should be. That's what my job is. So I'm not sure if you're saying the professional services goes to everybody, just to the Department of Public Services, and I don't think this is clear. I do agree with the way Councilman Schnetzer and Councilwoman Bowers and Councilman Renner are reading this. It does, the way it's written, does require that any amount over $10,000 spent by the Director of Public Service and Engineering has to be approved by you guys. Now, but then I'm not hearing that you want to necessarily approve it, just be made aware of it. And if so, we can, use other language to accommodate what you guys want. So I would really like to know what you want, and I'd be happy to help you.
Madam Chair. Ray, I actually, when I was talking with Crystal about this, that it would be sent to you, but then I think it went sent after there had been some tweaks to it.
Well-
So the point was to have you.
Right. If I may, I do want to give you kudos, because it was sent to me. Crystal did send that to
Okay,
me,
I
with your one
thought
with the
so.
3,000. And
Well,
I
that's-
thought we were going to talk about it. I didn't know this was coming up yet. I thought everyone was looking at the budget. So I
And-
hadn't really looked at it.
And our wonderful financial director there talked about 3,000, I think, at some point here as well. And so that has always been there. My concern is that we are kept abreast of everything that's happening in this city because we are part of being the government of this city. And so I'm glad you had a chance to see it, Ray. Thanks.
If I may, again, I think the ask is for it to come back to committee for further discussion. As an example, and I think Mr. Leesburg identified an example. I think an example with regard to, I think, Mr. Tresser, your questions and what makes some sense and clarity is in July, there was an administration contract that was executed with an architecture firm for some consulting services for $100,000. Those funds came from, as I understand it, multiple locations. And how did that, I think the question goes to how did that occur? And that did not have any pass-through council. There were a couple of lines within the mayor's report, but really no detail or anything else. So we've got a couple of points, I think, along with Karen's point of information and process through council, and then also as an example, a very significant expenditure that occurred without any purview from the legislative side of that.
It was just open from the multiple counts that had the appropriations available. So the appropriations, to my understanding, were available in a couple departments.
Do you know what those were?
I believe it was I don't have the PO in front of me, but I believe it was the Economic Development Department and the mayor's office, just those two. Do we include any others?
No, that was it. Nate?
If I may, in that regard, the scope of work that you're referencing, Councilman, included the previously appropriated dollars towards a revisioning plan that I believe was in the mayor's budget, the inclusion of developer interviews that were also included in the mayor's budget for another $30,000, and then we had additional dollars in my professional services budget to sort out for economic development strategy development. That was done under, I believe, Dr. Goss when she was in this role. So that's where the appropriations were, and they fell well within the scope of work tied to that contract. And I will note, too, you mentioned a few lines in the mayor's report. I went back and did an independent analysis this afternoon. It was referenced 35 times. A few times before I joined the administration, but certainly 35 different mayor's reports referenced that status of that contract.
The contract itself that was executed in July.
Or the plan. The plan, the intention of entering into that agreement, or the execution of that plan itself, as well as brought up multiple times at CIC meetings.
At CIC
Separate from council.
meetings.
Yes, ma'am.
Interesting.
Yes,
Separate
ma'am.
from council.
Yeah. That's not council.
But you have two council members on CIC, ma'am.
Yes, I know that,
I know.
sir.
I leave it to council, whatever the purview is of council. We'll see where the process goes.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, to this point, my focus has really been on 13504A. That seems to be, again, relatively superfluous because it deals with public service and engineering. Those items, out of anything that the city does, probably rise to the top as far as, clarity and transparency, again, going back to the CNA as well as the budget, where we now have, capital improvement dollars. We have separate breakout for all of that stuff. So that one right now just essentially seems unnecessary unless, again, I'm misreading this. And I will defer to the city attorney once he has some time to review it perhaps a little bit more to see if my interpretation is correct. As far as the other section regarding contract services, that seems to be, based on what I'm hearing from my colleagues up here, where some of the heartburn lies. We can have further discussion on that, but I don't have much appetite for the 13504A amendment.
So I think if that's the case, I think what I'm hearing is just simply remove the 134.04A and then take that forward as the discussion item for committee of the whole next time.
Well, again, I think, if I may, I think this is going to be amended at the committee of the whole. I mean, we can introduce it as
Sure.
is, and then it'll be amended at the second,
That's fine.
on the 20th.
Aren't we going to wait for some feedback from the city attorney before we introduce it? I mean, he's clearly saying this is violative of the charter as it's written. I'd rather not introduce
I
a
believe-
proposal that's violative of the charter.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you said 135.03, which is an existing section.
This is presented as a single ordinance, and you can only vote on an ordinance as a whole. You have to remove that and just put in 135.04 and then what you want. If you present it this way, you're presenting the whole thing. You guys are voting on everything that's in here.
I think what Mr. Leesburg's pointing out is there are only 2 sections that have any change. What you're looking at is existing language.
Right, but it
The
doesn't matter. If it's violative of the charter, it doesn't matter if it's existing language or not. It's still violative of the charter. It doesn't matter. And if you guys vote on that, you're voting on something that I'm sitting here telling you is violative of the charter. You can do as you wish.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lyric. I think the point that I was bringing up is that, and I think what Mr. Malarski is saying as well, is that both changes, if this ordinance is introduced as it is proposed on tonight's committee of the whole agenda, that we would have to be voting on the package or at least introducing the package. If you strike this, if you strike the changes to 135.04, then we are not introducing language that would be inherently violative of the charter. So bifurcate this before you introduce it, is what I'm saying.
You're referring to the 2 sections?
Correct.
That's different than what Mr. Malarski's pointing out. What he's indicating...
No, I think he's saying the same
Well,
thing.
hold
Exactly
on.
what I said.
Where I'm
Sorry, I was reading lawyerese.
focused to is the statement with regard to all purchases shall go through the service department. That is existing language. The only language that is being changed are the 2 red lines that we see. I don't know if Malarski can see that, but...
Right, I understand.
Oh, okay.
But what she said is exactly what I said, and is you're introducing the entire thing. You're not just introducing the changes, okay? This shouldn't have been presented in this manner. That's why you guys should have come to me. It shouldn't have been presented in this manner. It should have been presented with just 135.04 and the other one as changes, and then you wouldn't have this problem. That's why you should come through me.
Well, that's why I thought we were coming to you.
Well, we never sat down and talked about it. These things don't get thrown together in an hour.
The
I mean, you have
point
to do
was,
a lot.
my point was transparency on everything in what we do in this city. Transparency. And so I was working with this with Crystal, you know, she thought this would be way, and basically we sent it to you. I really think that this is something that needs to be out there, because I think everybody here that has given money into this, and that's where we get our money from, the people, need to know. And that's us too. We need to know too.
Everyone
And
agrees with
gosh
that, I think,
darn it, I love it
no
so
one's
much in
disagreeing
this
with that.
community. I want us to be the best community that was ever in any community. And indeed, I've spent my life saying the great city of Gahanna. And that's my whole life.
I've lived here 59 years, I understand.
Very long time.
We're at 7:14, do we want to?
the question is simply
That's why we
whether
have a vision and a mission statement.
introduction and the actual legislation be discussed at...
He's going to have amendments. Again, I've got no problem moving it for introduction because it's going to be amended, so.
We'll amend it before.
Can we,
I agree with you, Karen.
Thank you, Marissa.
can we just introduce the part under 6 and not the rest?
Certainly.
Would that solve it, Ray?
There is
Section
no
6.
You have
legislative...
to have a separate ordinance. This ordinance doesn't do that. You need a separate ordinance that just introduces number 6. Yes, you can do it that way, but you got to do it through a separate ordinance, not this one.
Okay.
But yes, you can do that.
So we could introduce an amendment to change 130, I don't know.
13505.
13505.
6.
E6, is that what it is?
Yep.
13505. E6, correct? Change,
Yes.
so we could introduce to change that ordinance, that part of the ordinance.
Well, you need to
That part of the
prepare an
code.
ordinance that introduces that. That hasn't been presented to the public yet. You have to give the public 24 hours notice before you can do that, so.
Yes, Stephen?
So our city attorney is very well advising us that there's a lot of work that's needed to actually restructure this a little bit. Can we just, I don't really understand what the rush is, but can we just agree that we're going to have a discussion item at our next committee of the whole or finance meeting that we talk about this some more?
And is it okay if I interject
Sure.
for just a minute? I am currently working on this section of code so we can incorporate the federal uniform guidance so we could properly spend the ARP funds. So that is something that will be presented to the city attorney, incorporating those uniform guidelines. So we are in the process currently of updating this code so we can meet the federal requirements.
Well, there you go.
That's wonderful. So we can add that as a committee item
So have it as a committee item for the next committee?
for even next week, because this is a special, so we'll have a committee meeting on the 13th.
Have a chance to look at mine, because it's pretty big when you incorporate the uniform guidance. So it is going to take him some time to go through all that. So I don't know if we'll have my incorporated changes by that time. So just food for thought.
Why don't we just put it on for a discussion item, and whether or not we have discussion, if he has enough information.
Yes, I'm supportive of that, Nancy.
All right. Okay. We'll adjourn. Committee of the whole.
Crystal, whenever you're ready.
I moved it down to 17.
I'm ready when you're ready.
At this time, I will call to order the regular meeting of Gahanna City Council for December 6th and ask for the invocation and pledge of allegiance by Mrs. McGregor.
Father God, we ask your wisdom as we decide issues for the city. We ask for your comfort for those who are lonely this holiday season. As always, we ask for your protection for the men and women of our police and armed forces. Amen. Pledge allegiance.
Roll call, please.
Angelou. Here. Bowers.
Here.
Lyric.
Here.
Leesburg.
Here.
McGregor.
Here.
Renner.
Here.
Schnetzer.
Here.
Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? None appearing. Do we have any speaker slips this evening?
Do you have a speaker slip? This gentleman would like
Okay.
to speak.
Take your time.
I can't get into any of this, so. take this one back.
Mr. President, do we want to move on with the public hearings? We can get those while the comments.
It's a speaker session. I assume it'll be just a moment.
It's like it's ghosts or something coming in. Yeah.
And I need to get the hearings anyway.
Do you have
You want an agenda?
Thank you so much.
The gentleman who wishes to speak is actually here as a representative for the applicant as part of the rezoning.
Oh, okay. Then we don't necessarily need the speaker slip. But in any case, I will at this time ask for any input from the administration with regard to Ordinance 0066-2021, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the City of Gahanna adopted by Ordinance 198-96 on November 19th, 1996, and is subsequently amended, changing the zoning district of a 1.59 plus or minus acre parcel located at 5847 and 5875 Taylor Road. Mr. Blackford, do you have any comments to make at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Leary. No new comments. We made a presentation at the Committee of the Whole meeting a few weeks ago. Happy to answer any questions. The applicant tonight, Jordan Fromm, he could not be here. He has a surgery. He has a representative out here who will be speaking on behalf of him here momentarily. But thank you, sir.
Certainly, thank you. At this time, I will open the public hearing for Ordinance 0066. Let me read through the process here with regard to how the hearing will go. Public hearings are a formal process which provides opportunity for the input of people who are for an issue and or against an issue that requires a public hearing. It is not an opportunity for general commentary. Proponents are provided with 7 minutes cumulative across all of the proponents. Opponents are provided 10 minutes, and then 3 minutes are left for proponents for rebuttal. At this time, we would open the floor for 7 minutes for proponents of the ordinance that is on the table. Is there anyone who would like to step forward and speak to the zoning change?
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Snyderman. I'm General Counsel for Valley Recovery Group. Unfortunately, Jordan cannot make it this evening, so I'm here as Jordan Fromm tonight, and I don't have any statement prepared in advance. My understanding is that everyone is familiar, has a packet, and is familiar with why we are here. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone would have them, but we're obviously here in support and would ask that you go ahead and vote in approval of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents that would like to speak with regard to this action? None appearing, I will ask for any opponents to the legislative action that is here for public hearing. Are there any opponents who would like to speak this evening? None appearing. If you would like to make any further comment, you may. We have 3 minutes remaining, and if not, I will pursue closing the hearing. Okay. We will close the public hearing for Ordinance 0066-2021 and move to Ordinance 0072-2021, an ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Gahanna, Ohio, during the fiscal year 2022. This hearing is a slightly different format. The format for finance hearings are speakers with regard to increases or additions of items of expenditures have 5 minutes. Speakers that will then be followed with 5 minutes for speakers who wish for reductions or eliminations of items from the budget. And then there are 3 minutes to speak on any general comments with regard to the budget. So at this time, we would open the floor, open the public hearing for finance. for appropriations and ask, are there any speakers who would like to speak with items they would like to see increased or additions made to the budget? None appearing. I will move to the opportunity for general public comment or public comment. Speakers wishing to speak on items to be reduced or removed from the budget. None appearing. Would ask if there are any speakers who would like to make any general comments with regard to expenditures shown within the appropriations that are on the table. None appearing. I will close the hearing with regard to the 2022 appropriations and move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Leesburg and a second by Mr. Schnetzer. Roll call.
Leesburg?
Yes.
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Lyric?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Brenner?
Yes.
Angelou?
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving to item F, this is for introduction and first reading. Is there anyone who would like to introduce the items under section F?
Mr. President, I'd like to introduce the items under F.
Thank you. So introduced. And ordinances for second reading and adoption. Ordinance 0066-2021, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Gahanna adopted by ordinance 198-96 on November 19th, 1996, and is subsequently amended, changing the zoning district of a 1.59 plus or minus acre parcel located at 5847 and 5875 Taylor Road. By all means, if anyone wishes, I can read the rest of this. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 0066-2021?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Angelou. Is there a second by Mr. Leesburg? Moved by Mrs. Angelou, seconded by Mr. Leesburg. Any discussion on ordinance 0066-2021? Mr. Leesburg.
Yes. When this, again, for some of us don't remember the history on this, this was kind of a land swap, if I'm not mistaken, for what became the Columbia Gas project. Again, if I got my bearings right, south of this area. The city kind of took the wetland open space and swapped this with the VRG. And the idea was that they could get office buildings and those kind of things that are with that zoning. So I'm a little disappointed that we've come back and the best we can do is residential. But other than that.
Any other comments with regard to 066-2021?
Mr. President, you know, I think Mr. Lyric and I live in this vicinity, and I'll speak for myself that as someone who frequents this area and particularly the path, I understand the need and the drive from a financial perspective to encourage commercial development, particularly on underdeveloped parcels. But this, to me, what's been presented and that this is being restored to residential really seems to make the most sense for these parcels. And I appreciate the diligence of VRG and Mr. Fromm in coming forward and requesting it from us. So thank you.
Yes, I had an opportunity to sit down with the developer on this project, and considering its location, considering that it backs to a preserve area, is certainly in direct contiguous to the existing trail that goes through the developed area over at Tech Center Drive and Science Boulevard, as well as connects to the neighboring community. It's reasonably as good a fit as I think will possibly be there, especially considering the topography. That's one of the most significant issues with regard to commercial development. In any case, any further comments with regard to this ordinance? None appearing. Roll call?
Angelou?
Yes.
Leesburg?
No.
McGregor?
Yes.
Brenner?
Yes.
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Lyric?
Yes. Motion carries. Ordinances for introduction, waiver, and emergency adoption. We have ordinance 0087-2021, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to sign an extension agreement for the Fraternal Order of Police Collective Bargaining Unit Lodge 9 contract, waive second reading, and to declare an emergency. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 0087, waive second, and declare an emergency?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schnetzer. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Renner. Discussion? Just want to point out, this is an extension of the existing without change while negotiations continue. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. Any further discussion with regard to ordinance 0087, 2021? Roll call?
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Angelou?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Lyric?
Yes.
Leesburg?
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving to ordinance 0088, 2021, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to sign an extension agreement for the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, collective bargaining units contract, waive second reading, and declare an emergency. Is there a motion to adopt, waive second reading, and declare an emergency for ordinance 0088, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Renner, seconded by Mrs. Angelou. Any discussion? And again, same situation. This is an extension of the existing agreement without change. Any further discussion with regard to ordinance 0088? Roll call?
Renner?
Yes.
Angelou?
Yes.
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Lyric?
Yes.
Leesburg?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Motion carries. Correspondence and actions, Madam Clerk?
Yeah, thank you. I do have a few items here tonight. Two requests for liquor permits are coming from two different locations for Speedway gas stations. One is on South Hamilton, 240 South Hamilton, and the other is at 376 Agler Road. There are no objections from the PD on these. These are just routine, so if you have no objections, these can move forward. I did have an addition. This is for an economic development transfer. If you have refreshed your iPads, you'll be able to view that. It's for 64 Granville Street. This is unique for me. I heard from an attorney here, and Ray's been a part of this chain of emails. There are no more liquor permits in the state, and so this is a transfer from one municipality to another. So this one is unique. If you want it to move forward, you do have to pass, you need a motion to approve this to move forward. Again, it's for RBD Restaurants LLC located at 64 Granville Street. It's being transferred from 10 North Park from Newark, Ohio, and there are no objections from the police department.
That's the Trex request?
Yeah.
Is that legislation expected this evening, or you'll present that for the next meeting?
You're able to, if you feel comfortable, you can pass a motion to move forward. If you'd like more information, we can bring this to the Committee of the Whole on the 13th. But the next opportunity to move forward with legislation would be the 20th, and I don't know what their time frame is.
Do you have legislation ready for it to be introduced as a motion to be adopted this evening? And it is a motion, not an ordinance.
It's just a motion, not an ordinance. So all you need to do is make a motion and a second, and if you all are in agreement, then I can have Ray sign this and send this out tomorrow.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to move the Trex application.
Your motion is to?
Move the Trex application forward.
Is to, for
Approve it.
council to approve the
Yes.
Trex application?
Yes. Move it forward to the process or approve it, yes.
Okay.
I'll second.
Is that,
Sorry.
is,
Is that enough?
if you can provide back the exact language that you're going to use based on that motion, just so we have it for clarity.
The motion on the table is to move forward or approve the request for an economic development Trex transfer form. And I just need a second.
For,
RBD Restaurant LLC, 64 Granville Street.
Thank you.
thank you. And Ms. Bowers, you're seconding?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Leesburg, a second by Ms. Bowers, to approve the Trex request by RBD. Any discussion? Roll call?
Leesburg,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Angelou,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Renner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Council representatives, the Community Improvement Corporation, Mr. Leesburg.
Nothing this evening.
Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, Ms. Angelou.
Our next meeting is this Thursday, and we're going to have a lunch, and hopefully this will be the end of our 2021 times to meet. And I can only hope that we have no more COVID whatevers, so that we can move on to everything we need to do. That's all I have.
Thank you. Convention and Visitors Bureau, Mr. Leesburg.
Thank you. Visit Gahanna hosted the Santa race on Saturday. There were 300 participants from Gahanna and Columbus, as well as other cities in Ohio. There's a holiday scavenger hunt taking place in Creekside District that is sponsored by Tina Whitbrook. It's a free activity for families to enjoy, and prizes are awarded upon completion. Mark your calendars for the Creekside Luminary Walk on Wednesday, December 22nd, which is sponsored by Kemba. There will be live entertainment, special guest appearances, sweet treats, and specials at Creekside restaurants and businesses. Come to Creekside to enjoy a walk through the park filled with thousands of beautiful lights, with the addition of hundreds of luminaires that evening. The Visitor Center and Ohio Urban Center gift shop is partnering with Grin to collect non-perishable items. Customers receive 10% off any purchase with a donation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And School Board, Mr. Schnetzer.
Nothing at this time.
Official reports. Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to the council members who were able to attend the tour of the new communications center last Thursday. Hopefully it was a great opportunity for you to see the inside of that building that has really been 10 years in fruition, coming to fruition, I should say. The planned go-live date was supposed to be this morning. It has been moved to, or this afternoon. It has been moved to 10 a.m. tomorrow due to some circumstances. There was actually a death in the family of the vendor who was not able to be there to help us with the go-live. So the go-live, actually with the 911 system, will be at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. On the 20th, in 2 weeks, we'll be swearing in 4 new officers. They are academy recruits who will be graduating. So we look forward to adding 4 new officers to our Division of Police in just 2 weeks. But in the meantime, our Gahanna Division of Police is partnering with Gahanna Lions Locker, as they do each year, for the Shop with a Cop event. That'll be had, I believe, this Thursday up at Meyer. And we will have photos posted of that later this week. But that is always a tremendously impactful event for our community. And I know our officers very much look forward to engaging with the public as well and doing what they can to support the community. And just finally, I sent earlier to council today a press release that was issued, the long-awaited press release that was issued by Jobs Ohio, announcing the ADB SafeGate project. That project is an expansion project. ADB SafeGate has been in the Gahanna community for nearly 40 years. This is an investment by that company to create and establish a new center of innovation. They will be purchasing the property at Science and Tech Center Drive. They are a leader in the aerospace industry. This is a hugely impactful project for the city of Gahanna, looking to add a minimum of 20 jobs with an average estimated annual salary of $117,000 apiece, which is estimated to generate net new annual payroll anywhere ranging from $2.35 million to $4.7 million over the next several years. This is a growth industry for Gahanna. It involves STEM jobs, engineering jobs, et cetera, which we all know are extremely important to our state leadership, but extremely important to the region. And this project not only solidifies ADB SafeGate's investment here in Gahanna, but it also solidifies Gahanna's role within the region of being a hub for STEM-focused careers. It's going to create workforce opportunities, abilities for us to partner with our school district to introduce students to those types of careers. It's just a tremendous investment that is being made. So we have the groundbreaking tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Some of you have already RSVP'd. If you have not, it's still not too late. We would love to see you there to show the support for a company, again, that has been in Gahanna and invested in our community for nearly 40 years. They could have gone anywhere else. And I actually would be remiss if I did not express thanks to our partners at Jobs Ohio and the state of Ohio. There are state incentives involved in this because they also recognize the value in not only keeping this company in the state of Ohio, but keeping this company in the city of Gahanna. The facility that they are opening will be a de facto North American headquarters. This is a Belgium-based company. Tomorrow there will be top-level officials from the company in Belgium here for the groundbreaking ceremony. So again, if you have not yet RSVP'd it, but you are able to be there, we would strongly invite you to be there to help show support for this company and this project. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney, Mr. Malarski.
I'd just save any comments for the proposed executive session.
Council comment. Mrs. Angelou.
Well, Mayor, we better dress warmly tomorrow because I think it's supposed to be very cold, but they're coming from Belgium, so that probably doesn't matter. And the fact that we're having a global place, a global business here is quite a wonderful thing to happen for our community, our great city of Gahanna. Bob Dole passed away, and I was fortunate enough to, when he was running for president, when he was here in the city of Gahanna, to have my picture taken as he was leaving in his car. Becky Stinchcomb was with me, and the two of us have our picture on the front of the Dispatch while he is in his car kind of talking to us. It was quite a wonderful thing, and I have it actually up in my home, this picture of being with the person who might have been the President of the United States. He also has just a wonderful resume of all of the wonderful things he did, and of course, what happened to him in World War II, which created, he always walked with a pencil or a pen in his hand. So he's 98 years old, and God bless him, he's up in heaven now. So with that, that's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. Let me first start, so I don't forget, thanking Visit Gahanna and Parks and Rec and the police for the collaboration and any other partners that were involved with the Santa race that was hosted on Saturday. That was my first year participating, and my son and I participated in the runs and had a wonderful time. The course was fantastic, and it was a perfect day for running. 38 and sunny, so for those of you who run know that that's actually like wonderful. I also have included my constituent update, my November report, and have asked the clerk to include that in our minutes going forward. Part of that update includes some overview in some constituent concerns that were raised over the month of November. I have also included some activities that I engaged in, including attending the economic development presentation that was put on by Mr. Strum and some other regional partners last month. I also just wanted to speak for a moment on the Communications Center tour that I had the privilege to attend on Thursday. Now serving 2 years in this role, so being halfway through my term, that was one of the, thankfully we're out of sort of pandemic mode and back in person and being able to do things like go on tours like that again and interact with other members of the city. That being able to see the wealth of talent that is here in Gahanna and specifically working for the city of Gahanna was a pivotal moment for me. And I just want to thank the mayor, Chief Spence, and all involved in that project. IT director, it's incredible. I was just astounded at the level of professionalism and thoughtfulness and skill that went into that. So kudos and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leesburg.
Nothing this evening.
Mr. Renner.
Yes, thank you. Couple of things. The Operations Center tour was actually phenomenal. My hat's off to the police station and as well as to the mayor and her staff. The walkaway word that you could probably get is collaboration. It's intense collaboration to have both Mifflin Fire and the city police department inside one building, or at least partially. I know your entire department's not there, but it was really eye-opening to see that whole entire process, and I thank you deeply for that education. It's also nice to know that our detectives have a place to go now and to operate in rooms to talk to individuals. I know the police are very crowded in their current situation, and so seeing this operations center was just really nice to see. I also participated in the tour bus that led by the mayor and Nate Strum for economic development, and the topic was Creekside District and what may come. It was a really good, constructive discussion, and I hope that we have more discussions about that and include the public on what are some of the visions that might be coming that way. Saturday, I got to visit with Santa. I'm probably not going to get what I wanted, but Santa and his helpers, thanks to Jason Warwick and his wife Colleen, they have put together, and you probably remember this before, that he likes to play Santa, and Colleen plays Mrs. Claus at Imperial Park and the little gazebo. Saturday night, we had 170 plus people come, lots of little kids to get on Santa's lap and dream. He also had a place where kids can bring letters to Santa, and Jason is, as Santa Claus, responding to each and every one of these. And also, Make Gahanna Yours, Donna Simmons, was there providing activities for children. Blank Slate provided coffee and hot chocolate, and Teresa Emch in the back, oh, I see Matt too. Teresa was dedicated in the cold weather, serving all the hot chocolate and coffee. And then we had police department and Mifflin Fire there with the trucks and cars and stuff like that, and staff to be able to be on hand. I walked away thinking, wow, I didn't just get to see Santa, but I saw a piece of my community. I saw people walking from their homes to go see Santa. And that was a really remarkable thing. So thank you all to who it was involved in actually putting that together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schnetzer.
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Ms. McGregor.
I wanted to, I also was on the tour of the Communication Center, and it is really an amazing facility. I didn't realize that it's more than the dispatchers were moving, and that was a great thing to see. The other departments, the room for the detectives, interview rooms, and things like that. And I know that they say it's 10 years they've been working on this, but actually it's more like 25. This was proposed for a police department to join with other, for the dispatchers to join with other units, probably at least 25 years ago, maybe more. But it took a long time to bring them around. Fire departments came along a little, they were a little more amenable to coordinating, but I'm really glad that the police departments see the value of it now, and that the chief has worked so diligently to accomplish this, so thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing to add this evening. We do have a standing item number M, executive session. Is there a motion for executive session this evening?
So moved.
For, I believe, which? C, court action?
Yeah.
So as I understand it, so there is a motion, your ask is for a motion to go into executive session under 5.40C to confer with the city attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action?
Yes.
Is there a second? And we also have executive session for 5.40A to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of public employee or official. Is that included in your motion, 71?
I'll wrap them both together, yes. Thank you.
Is there a second to go into executive session under 5.40C and 5.40A?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Leesburg,
Yes.
Angelou,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Schnetzer.
Yes.
Motion carries. At this time, we'll go into session under 5.40C first. Mr. City Attorney?
Yes.
Counsel?
May we meet in the committee
password just, and suddenly it's just.
Do you know your password?
Yeah.
You gotta go in a second. I don't want to yell at you. You're late. You're not typing. Use the.
I can do it.
I have no idea.
It's just the weirdest thing ever.
We're gonna give it to George. We're gonna step on it a couple times, and he's gonna get it working for you.
Go for it.
All right, good. Consider it done.
Thank you very much, Mitch. I was not trying to get you into, I just didn't want to say that. I knew we had it.
Yeah, you're not muted.
want to bring everyone up to speed here in just a second about how we're working this evening. For the sake of all of you who I know would like to stay here as long as possible this evening, we're going to change up exactly what we've done. So we had a motion to go into executive session, which we did, and we did that on one of the topics at hand. Rather than continue the discussion on the next part, which could take some amount of time, we're coming back in here. We're going to recess from executive session in the regular meeting. We will go into Finance Committee, chaired by Mr. Schnetzer. Once Finance Committee is concluded, we'll then reconvene our regular meeting so that then council can continue with the business at hand. Does anybody in council have any questions on that process that we're going to follow? Okay, at this time, I would like to ask for a motion to recess from executive session and regular council until the conclusion of the Finance Committee. Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Leesburg. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Renner. Is there any discussion amongst council? No discussion, then ask for roll call.
Leesburg,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Bowers. Yes. Larry. Schnetzer,
Yes.
Angelou.
Yes.
Motion carries. So regular committee of council has now been recessed. We will now, whenever clerk is prepared to switch over to finance, Mr. Schnetzer will kick off finance and we'll go from there.
I'm just going to note on the record that Nancy McGregor went into executive session. She did not come out of executive session. Is she coming back?
She is. She is.
Okay, thank you. And I'm ready for finance whenever you are.
So let's kick off Finance Committee for December 6, 2021. This is just continuing the discussion that we've had over the last several meetings. I think where we left off is we've kind of shifted gears from the fact-finding portion of the budget discussion more to the, I guess what I'll describe as an input portion of the budget discussion. By email, we talked about some process. I'm not sure that we came to a conclusion about process other than we were going to hold this committee meeting tonight on a typically not committee meeting night, just to allow us some more time. My hope is that before we conclude Finance Committee this evening, that we can provide the administration clear direction about what is the ask that we would like to see back 7 days from now. I would describe this evening as probably best described as just an air it out session. I think, to borrow a phrase that was used by one of my colleagues. So with that, I will open it up for discussion. I don't have anything personally myself that I prepared, but I did want to give everybody an opportunity to, if there are questions of the administration, any loose ends that need to be addressed. But I think largely this might be a good discussion amongst ourselves, colleagues of council, as to what it is we're going to coalesce around and what we would like to see back from the administration 1 week from now. So with that, I'll open it up to council. Does anybody have any items in particular that are giving them heartburn? Go ahead. Kick it off. Give us some momentum.
Okay, I'll kick it off.
Ms. Bowers.
Thank you. So I just want to thank Mr. Schnetzer and Ms. Burry, I think, for some clarification for my benefit. I think there's a lot of information in here, and so I think being able to sort of decipher what it is where the delta is coming from between revenue and appropriations and how to understand that and interpret that. I appreciate the feedback and the clarity that I've been able to gather from our finance chair and from the finance department. So thank you for that. I don't have any significant concerns. I do, I guess, want to ask, and Mayor, forgive me for putting you on the spot, and I'm happy to talk about this offline too. But I'm interested in collaboration between marketing and communications department and council, and maybe having, as far as an air it out session, maybe having a little bit of conversation about how those roles can interface with council as a whole, not necessarily individual council members, but supporting council office, considering the small budget and small staff that 7 of us share. Sure.
Is that a discussion you want to have offline? I do know, we have our communications manager here, and I would look to her because she would be the one coordinating that. We could schedule something offline if you wanted to have that conversation, or?
I would rather have it transparent to everybody,
Okay.
please.
That's
If you're
fine. Well,
ready to have that conversation now, that's great. Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Wester, can I ask you to, since you would be leading that, have you speak to that?
I don't know if this is on. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Do you have any specific questions, or, I know we had initially, gosh, I don't know how many months ago it was, but some questions about newsletters, Uniquely Gahanna, things like that. Are they centered on that, or I'm happy to answer any questions, or?
Yeah, are you looking for how we could best support council office? Can you help with?
Yeah, I think just a general, at a high level, right? At a high level, especially with adding personnel, adding staff that are intending to support communications and a cohesive communications for the city. How do you intend, or do you intend to also interface with council in that way, and support council as a body?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you guys, as Ms. Angelou pointed out several times, you guys are an extremely important part of the city. We're 3 branches of government, but we're one team, and so I'm passionate about helping you guys get out whatever information you want to get out. The clerk of council and I work great together. I know, gosh, I'm trying to think what month that was that I sent you the information, President Lyric,
I
on.
want to say it was September, October.
Probably
Ish.
September, yeah. So I sent an email with all the different communication tools we currently have at our disposal, just as kind of a, here's what we can do. You know, I think what Council Clerk and I have talked about before is you guys kind of decide on the content and what you want out. I can partner with Clerk of Council, President of Council, Vice President of Council, whoever it is, and decide how best to get that information out. Who needs it, when they need it, that kind of thing. So I'm more than happy to have a conversation with council leadership. Or right now, if you guys have any questions, we can certainly talk it through. But absolutely, you guys, I know President Lyric has voiced frustration in the past, not feeling like there's an easy avenue to get out information on behalf of council. So it's an opportunity, and we can certainly talk through the best options
Just
to remedy
want to be
that.
clear, that wasn't a issue with the administration or with communication folks within the administration. It's just the challenges in a public body and in an area where media is dispersed and there is no central voice or means of communicating across to any community at this point, unless you're a large, major, multi-million population municipality.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers your questions, but I mean, it's a big conversation, but it's one that I definitely would love to have. There's always more opportunities to get in front of residents, tell our story better, and try to reach residents. This is always changing, quite honestly.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
Can I ask something? I've noticed that in the newspaper, there's very little on Gahanna, and now it's the Rocky Fork, meaning New Albany, and I mean, in this past time, they've had more things on New Albany and Westerville, and I think Polaris, there were things on that, and we had nothing except in the sports part. What do you think is the problem with that? I'm sure it isn't coming from us.
Well, part of it is they are consolidating areas of reporting. So you're right in saying that the Rocky Fork was Johnstown, Westerville, Gahanna. Now it's also New Albany. They're cutting costs wherever they can, and so that's part of it, is just consolidating the areas that are covered in each paper. I'm working closely with the Dispatch editor and This Week News editor and our own reporter Marla, who most of us know, to try to get stories in there. I know there have a couple that they haven't printed yet. It's kind of a constant battle. I mean, right now, New Albany has had some, I joked around with somebody, I don't know if it was you, Council President, but, they had that huge new amphitheater and things like that. We don't have a lot of undeveloped, shiny objects to talk about
We're
right
going
this
to do
second.
that, though.
But we will. And I know that
I
they're
will
going
say
to be
the
running.
ADB SafeGate project was released today by This Week paper.
Yes. Yeah, and they were on, and I worked with them ahead of time to make sure they had all the information, so that will be out there. So I think some of it is just kind of circumstantial, but I'm working closely with Scott to make sure that that changes, so.
Well, I'm going to say thank you for doing that, because every time I open up the paper and I see it, I just want to just scream, because there's nothing there. And if it is something, it's bad, you know? And so I appreciate that, and it will take a whole lot to do, and yeah, thank you.
So maybe I'll take a different approach here. Kind of similar, I suppose, Mr. President, to the hearing, where there was time allotted for additions, time allotted for anything that needed to be taken out, and then time allotted for general commentary. I know, as the recipient of many of your questions, as I compile them and send them to the administration, there has been sort of an implied angst over some of the or I should say expenditures exceeding revenues. I don't know if in the last month we've gotten comfortable with that. If not, this is the time to express whether or not there needs to be reduction. So again, I'll just open it up to council. But my goal is that when we conclude this session here, that we've given the administration clear direction on what they should come back to us with 1 week from now. So does anybody see a need for reductions? Mr. Leesburg had his hand up. Or I guess you guys can arm wrestle for it.
In years past, we've asked past administrations, for instance, cut $2 million. And we gave suggestions, again, because those subject matter experts, they know what they want to do, it's their vision, those kind of things. We've got a lot of clarification on what all these different programs are, that type of thing, but I don't know that we've really talked about if it's what we want to fund. Again, I'm not happy with, again, what we call deficit spending, or spending more than, what we're bringing in. That's not okay. To that point, I don't know if we would just want to say, again, it's the 6th of December, hey, go cut $2 million, and they come back and it's not where we want it. We're in the problem where we had a couple years ago, and I assume everyone wants a budget done before Christmas. So anyway, that's.
Well, we're only talking about 1.2 million in unreserved fund balance, so we're not even talking about 2 million.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see $2 million in cuts myself, at least.
Can you repeat that?
I'd like to see at least $2 million in cuts.
2 million in cuts out of the GF, or 2 million in cuts out of all governmental funds?
Yeah, out of the GF.
Out of the GF. So where Councilwoman Bauer's figure is coming from is on page 4, and I understand these are obviously estimates.
Yeah.
They could fluctuate. However, what's being projected right now is a use of unrestricted, unreserved fund balance to the tune of 1.2 million. So what you're saying is you would like to see a swing of 2 million, so a carryover in 2022 of 800,000?
Yeah.
I would go, but Mrs. McGregor was going to speak, and then.
Well, it was a specific thing, and I don't know, maybe I should have brought it up before, but when we promoted the Director of Finance to the Director of Administrative Services last year, HR, I'm sorry, thank you. HR, we were told that they would not hire a Director of HR, but then this year in the budget, there's a Director, if I remember this right, asked to be hired. I don't understand why. I mean, that's one thing I think that, we were told that we wouldn't need to hire an HR director, and now we do. So that's one thing I would think that we could do without.
You want to clarify that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, or
yeah, I'm going to actually ask Director Vollmer to speak to it. Just to clarify, we're not looking to add an HR director. That role is still being filled by the Director of Administrative Services, but Director Vollmer, if you could clarify.
Do you have the position that's, okay, go ahead, explain it.
Yeah, so the request is to promote an existing staff to an HR manager to manage the day-to-day operations of the HR department. With the increase in staff we had last year and this year, the functions of the HR department have grown tremendously. And then it would be to backfill her existing role as an HR administrator, which is an HR generalist. So there are items that are the city is not doing right now from a risk perspective and a safety perspective that we should be doing.
What are those? What are those things?
We don't have a safety program or a risk program at all. We don't have those programs in place. There's no comprehensive safety training. There's no comprehensive injury risk mitigation from a workers' comp perspective. Those were not in place when I got here 3 years ago, and since I've been here, we've been improving some things, but without an increase in additional staff, we cannot keep up with what we're doing. You know, the civil service tasks that the HR department does on behalf of the Gahanna Civil Service Commission have increased by threefold since I've been here. We administered at least 6 to 10 tests last year, and next year we're already planning for at least 4, if not more. Those are tests that have to occur every year, and they occur at the beginning of the year. It takes an inordinate amount of staff time, not only for my team, but other teams such as in police. We have some civilian staff that help us as well, and we have staff across the city that help us administer those tests. So, and then by having an HR manager direct the day-to-day operations of the HR department, I would still be responsible for all the labor relations for the city. So that would include any work with our union groups or any employee issues that arise, as well as harassment investigations, any type of critical misconduct investigations I would be doing as well. And it also allows me to assist those. You know, I helped Joanne a lot with the budget this year. As you all know, she's been doing that alone for many years. With the addition of Corey, too, that'll help. And then I'm also assisting in the mayor's office with some strategic planning, capital improvement plan, and other long-term plans that have been stalled at the city for many years, including the facilities assessment. So when we initially came up with the concept, I think people talked about it earlier, it's always an evolving thing. Plans change, positions changed, and so with the increase in duties that I had, the plan for me to do the day-to-day HR functions and these other programs for the city, it's not feasible. I can't keep up, and my staff can't keep up. And I think it's vital that we have a professional development and training plan, as well as a safety and risk mitigation program at this city.
Mrs. McGregor, you still have the floor, so if there's anything further that you want to add or ask.
No, I tend to agree with Mr. Leesburg, though I'm not, I said it probably at the first meeting, I'm not a fan of the spending more than we're taking in. Particularly, this is only the second year, and last year was such an anomaly, I don't think we can really count it much, but of taking in more, of spending more than we're taking in. And I think that, you know, we told the voters this would last for 20 years, and if in the first year we're saying, okay, we're going to go into the reserve, not that we can't do that. I mean, not that we're not able to do that, but I think it sets a bad precedence for the next 18 years or 19 years if we say already we're going to go into the, we're going to spend more than we're taking in this year. And I would prefer, especially with so many things unsure in the economy right now, I would prefer to keep the spending with whatever we project coming in, not spending more than that.
So I just do want to clarify, we're not using the reserve.
Right. I'm probably
so that's kind of our.
I'm probably using the wrong term.
Yeah.
Right.
So the reserve is the 6.7 million to for anything unforeseen
Right.
that may occur. That's kind of our savings. The unreserved, if you think about it in a simplistic form, it's kind of the residual balance of your checkbook account. So after you're done paying all your bills, you have additional money in there that you could spend. That's kind of what the unreserved balance represents. And basically our responsibility as public servants is to return taxpayer dollars to them in the form of services. So to just hold on to this money without any purpose is kind of a disservice to them.
But I think that it's a bigger disservice to spend more than we're taking in now without knowing, we don't know what's coming in the future. And with so many changes, with people working in different places, and I just think that this is not the year to start that. And so I know that we're within our rights to do that, but I don't look at it like not giving back the services to the citizens. I look at it as preserving a balance that we can use for for projects in the future. We have lots and lots of capital projects. We don't need to do them all at once, but we have years of projects coming up, and I think that's, I just don't think it's a wise decision myself.
Well, that's what the 75% of the 1% was dedicated to capital. So that old
But
way,
that's-
before we had a dedicated form of capital resources, we did. We only had the general fund unreserved balance for capital. It's no longer the case anymore.
Right, I know.
There's really no reason to just hold on to that money without a purpose. So we identified valid purposes to use it for. And we have a graphic that I'm hoping might help, that we'll kind of pull up here. I'm going to send it to Kevin to pull up for you.
It's essentially the same topic.
Mr. Lyric, you have some input?
If this is graphics going to come up quickly, that's fine.
Okay. Mr. Renner?
I don't know if, right now, if this really adds to the discussion or not. I know there's angst about the future, but I know Joanne has talked about the future, and she's put that into her calculus when she creates these budgets. I trust Joanne implicitly. But if you look at page 40 on the general fund, while we're waiting for the graphic, 2020 actual, January 1st, was a little bit more than $17 million. The projected balance by the end of December for 2022 is nearly $20 million, $19.7 million. About, give or take, $3 million. So we're showing.
I'm sorry, you said page 40?
Yes, page 40 of our budget book.
If you look
In
at
the
fund balance, is what he's
general
referring to.
fund, if you look at the end of the day,
Oh, he's down here. Gotcha.
I get the concept. I understand, Councilwoman McGregor, what you're saying. However, to me, over the long term, we're projected for our balances to go up. Now, maybe you think that it's not really going to be 20 million. Maybe you think it's 18 million. Okay. We're still showing a positive direction. So just to put that into the dialogue.
So I pulled up an old graphic that some of you might be familiar with if you've been on council or if you've been at previous meetings. So there was this red ball, green ball that I believe was brought up by Angel Muma that was carried forward for budget after budget that kind of described that the red ball, that's our emergency reserve. That's for the unforeseen. That's extreme. We're not touching that. So the excess reserve is the kind of the green ball. That's what we used to refer to when we talked about using these monies for different initiatives. So Kevin, if you could bring up the next one.
Hey, Joanne, what's the fiscal year end date on those figures that are on the screen right now?
This is directly out of the budget book. So if you refer to page 54, I believe it is. This is kind of what we're projecting our ending fund balance to be, is the 16.9, where it says projecting ending fund balance kind of in the middle of that graphic. Showing the 6.7 million is that red ball that we're not going to touch, and then the 10.2 million that we're projecting we're going to have available, based on how we're projecting 2021 to end. So then this kind of takes that excess reserve and then breaks it down a little bit further, kind of taking that information that's on page 54 and kind of giving it just a basic glance. Of that 10.2 million, we're estimating to use, again saying estimated, again referring back that the budget is very fluid. This is our best estimates based on the information we have at the time of formation. And then we have a remaining excess of about $9 million. That's 4 months of operations, twice what's required by our general fund policy. So I believe we're being very responsible with our requests. We're not taking it down to the bare minimum. Still leaves us with $9 million to even address an emergency if it comes up before we even have to touch or consider using that $6.7 million of savings.
Hey, real quick, Joanne, is this one of those unassigned, unencumbered deals, why those numbers don't tie out to page 40?
Yeah, so the page 40 does not have the emergency reserve laid in.
Okay.
And it doesn't have, what we're estimating to have in reserve for encumbrance. That's just a straight
Okay.
cash in, cash out.
Thank you.
Chair.
Mr. Larrick was on deck.
Thank you.
And then I'll come to you.
Do my best to stay organized in the delivery and information and kind of concept here. But first off, I just want to go back to page 40 that you're referring to, Mr. Renner. At the end of 2021, that number is 20.9 million. At the end of 22, that number is 19.7 million, a reduction of 1.2
That's
for the
true.
year.
I wasn't showcasing that. I was just showcasing over a 2-year time span, it goes up. So that's all I was trying to say.
It goes up using 2020, an anomaly year. In any case, just want to point out that from a point in time with regard to this budget as a 1.2 spend, I want to step back for a moment and go back to 2018. In 2018, I asked Mrs. Angelou, Mrs. McGregor, Mr. Schnetzer to lead a committee that evaluated our capital assets within the city. And in fact, that became the impetus for the November ballot issue that ended up not passing by a slim amount, and became fundamentally the driver of the legislation that I wrote, that council approved, that the community approved by over 80%, that became issue 12, providing funds for the community. That committee, and by all means, the three of you can provide any insight and additional detail to those discussions, but evaluated the expenditures and capital and the state of our capital assets in the community and identified a need for additional revenue funds or additional revenues. The process through issue 12 did a carve out to protect those funds in various areas, partly operational and most significantly to capital. Stepping forward to just, I believe, about 2 months ago, a presentation came to council with regard to capital needs of I believe it was 4 buildings, literally 4 buildings, that was roughly $100 million. As we step back to looking at 18 and looking at the tax initiatives that were put on the table, the review identified an expectation of the tax issue having the ability to survive for 20 years. Now I'm going from the 2018 and the 2019 passage, the beginning of 2019, and the ability for those funds to begin to accumulate partway through 2019. And we get to now the 21 budget to 22, essentially, figuratively, a light switch in time. One point in time to the immediate next point in time, figuratively speaking. What we are doing is on the first, effectively, I cautiously use this word, normal budget. We are spending in the proposal, I shouldn't say we, the proposal is to spend part of the initial unencumbered funds on hand. And I clearly, as I'm speaking, I'm fully aware of the required reserve, the unencumbered balance. What concerns me, as with a proposal of budget, is that, and I recognize that there is a high degree of passion, there is a high degree of interest to accomplish work within the community and recognize the need to accomplish that work. At the same time, in order for funds that were created in a funding structure that was created that was expected to have a generational lifespan, for that to occur, and at the same time come even close to accommodating $100 million of 4 facilities, not including additional capital requirements that exist today. is going to require a pacing of those expenditures. So yes, I do understand that it is possible to dip into those funds today. I do, legally, legislatively, all of those things are possible. What I am concerned with is on the first nominally normal budget, that we dip into those funds without let me pause for a moment. We do have, and again, part of the fiscal process changes that council, that I and the rest of council implemented many years ago with regard to being provided the capital needs documents with regard to multiple projects, and clear that those things exist as their own individual items with rough outlines of timing. But from the standpoint of a reasonably comprehensive timing of investments timing of capital investments to occur across a time span within the physical capabilities of the community, either through cash funding, accumulating cash in advance and then expending, and or debt if that should so be required, that hasn't come forward at this time. And so long story short of all of this dialogue, it clearly makes sense to me that at this point in time, a budget that is cash positive holding for the near term is appropriate with the bigger picture of the long-term investments that need to be made and how that gets accomplished over the lifespan of the funding expectations that exist today would be preemptive to those expenditures. That isn't to say that I think these are entirely, but generally speaking, the initiatives are wasteful or not appropriate. The question is, how is this being looked at, not in the 22 budget, but in the 22, 23, 25, 28, 30, et cetera budgets? From my perspective, a nominal savings in the cash from an operational perspective, and the same goes for capital. So my numbers are probably even more conservative than what I'm hearing. In context of understanding how of assessing how this plays out over the long term needs to be done. All that being said, I would be looking at an operational budget short about $2 million, similar to Mr. Leesburg, plus or minus, and roughly the same amount from capital. Again, not to say that the capital items are in and of themselves inappropriate, but to say that how does this fit into accomplishing these things over the time based on what clearly are not within our control, increasing costs of these initiatives far faster than potentially could have been determined some time ago, and to protect the community physically in the long run.
So, and Mrs. Angel, I'll get to you, but I'm taking notes here as trying to keep track of divergent views here. So, Mr. Lyric, right now, I have, based on your statement, your ask is reduce GF spending by $2 million and reduce the capital improvement fund spending by $2 million.
Yes, and let me be clear. The point of the capital reduction at this time is not to kill the projects indefinitely, but if the assessment of the timing and where these projects should occur and where they fit comes to light that it makes sense to do it in this fashion, then supplementally appropriate them. But I would not do it in advance.
Mrs.
And
Angel?
would vote no.
Yeah, I
should
just
that
have,
occur.
I have a question, Joanne. Do we have any policies that need to be renewed or maybe go through them and decide things need to be tweaked? Or are there some policies that we don't have that we need to have?
Concerning,
Any financial things. We have one for the reserve, we have one, these policies. And we haven't looked at those policies for a number of years.
we just-
Generally, I mean, where we were talking about them. But are there other policies that we need to be putting into, maybe it's that $3,000 thing?
well, we just amended the general fund balance policy this year.
Yeah.
I'm working on the procurement policy that we had discussed early on. We're working on a capital improvement plan that should be upcoming soon. We're working with Gen 6 on that. We have the strategic plan refresh, which is also in the works. We have
Okay,
the facilities plan. So, yeah, I mean, we revisit these things on a
Okay,
regular
I just
basis.
want to make sure that those are like at the places that they should be, those particular policy things. I'd like to ask about the strategic plan, though. When does council get involved with the strategic plan?
I'll have to defer to the,
Actually,
Mayor's
Director
office on
Vollmer,
that.
if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I just had a phone call with our consultant today, so we laid out a timeline that once that's finalized, I'll be happy to share with you, but
Well, no, wait a minute. You have a consultant. Is he doing the strategic plan, or is it he, she? I'm sorry.
She is assisting the city in doing that plan. Nothing's been finalized. We just talked about a timeline of when it will come to council, what the next steps are. Yeah.
Well,
today.
Perhaps this is not the right time on the budget
Yeah,
to be talking about this, but.
Just given the hour, I'm hoping that maybe if there are more details on something like
Yeah,
that seems to be very granular and perhaps
I
not in the
think we need
budget,
to,
if we could.
if we're not going to be part of the strategic,
That's
the
not,
actual
that's not
going
what
in
I'm
it.
saying. That's
Okay,
not what I said.
That's all I want to know.
No, I'm happy to talk to you about it offline if you would. I literally had a phone call with her at 4:30 today, so I don't have all the details memorized because I literally just talked to her.
And I can clarify, council absolutely will be part of the strategic planning process. We are working internally because if the 12 departments of the city don't have their strategic vision for their departments in mind and outlined for where they think the department should go, then it's pointless to sit and present something to council first. So we've been working on getting the internal departments and their individual strategic long-term visions ready and finalized so that we then can share those with council and then get your input. And together in a collaborative fashion, we come up and finalize with a long-term strategic vision plan. The Go Forward Gahanna plan is still in place. The high 5 overarching priorities are still in place and are still what we are abiding by with everything that is in the budget. That is still in place. What we are doing is taking those 5 overarching principles that were identified in Go Forward Gahanna. Sorry, I'll stop.
I'm just going to cut it
No,
off.
you're right.
I get that this item is tangentially
You're right.
related to the budget. The budget is tangentially related to everything in the city.
Nope, you're right. Just wanted to answer the
But I've got to keep us on
question.
track here. It's 9:15 at night, and I think we're far from
I'm
consensus
missing
here.
the voice, so I don't know about you, but
So, Mrs. Angela, you still have the floor. If there's anything
I'll stop.
directly related to the budget.
No, I want to hear more about the strategic plan and that sort of thing, but that could be another time,
Okay, thank you.
a better time.
So as of right now, I have a couple of asks from council members. I'm hearing, at least from 3, a $2 million ask to reduce the GF spend. I'm hearing at least from 1, reducing capital improvement fund spend by $2 million. Are we any closer to coalescing around anything? I can certainly understand those concerns myself. The $100 million, facility study is a bit of it's a bit of a rude awakening when you do see it. But I also understand precisely what Mr. Brenner is talking about. At the end of 2019, you had $17 million in general fund balance. We're projected to finish the 2022 fiscal year with an increase of $3 million. And I don't have quite the heartburn or the reservation over the spend this year in the general fund. Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. I guess I just want to, and whether this sways any of my colleagues, I'm not sure, but I understand the concerns, and I understand that the facilities assessment does give us reason to pause. I do want to note, though, that I think that city staff has been the city has been understaffed for a very long time, and we also have lost some very good people to other entities, other organizations. For us to be able to staff, maintain, provide service in these incredible facilities that we are gearing up to put forward to our citizens, we have to have that foundation. The foundation that Miranda's talking about with HR policies in place so that we can build out these programs and these cities. I see this spend as laying foundation to preserve assets in the form of human capital and to make sure that we have those foundations laid. I think that is exactly the directive that our residents gave us with passing issue 12 with GRIT, and this is exactly on point with that. Again, I see the same numbers. We are projected to finish 2022 with still $2.6 million more than we started 2020. That's all I have to say.
Is there a compromise here? 1 million. If we have some numbers, if the guardrails are or the goalposts are, some of us are fine with it as is, others want to see a reduction of 2. Can we agree to ask the administration to come back with their best approach to reducing 1 million?
You're still spending. You still got 200-ish.
So your answer is no. You wouldn't be amenable to that.
But the expenditures number is 923,000 excess. On page,
Well, you've got it.
on page 40, advances in and out. Okay.
It truly is. And again, these are estimates. They're probably pretty close, but they are estimates.
You know, we started 2021 with the expectation that we were going to use $1.8 million of fund balance. Our revenue outproduced our projections because of all the uncertainty surrounding COVID. You know, we expected continued declines, and instead we had an increase. So we're projected to end 2021, instead of using 1.8 million, our estimate is that we are going to end with adding back 665,000 to fund balance. And it's the same thing as we're moving into 2022. I projected no revenue growth based on a lot of these uncertainties. And our economic development department, you know, and our planning department are just, their projects are coming in. We're probably going to exceed the revenue estimates I have right now. And as I see those come in, and as we're going through, the same as we do every year. If revenue's coming in higher, we're not going to ask to spend it. We're going to do what we did this year. You know what? We got more revenue than anticipated. We're not going to ask for it this year, but we are going to request to use it in the following year. Again, staying within our policies, making sure that we have adequate balances, not dipping into our savings. So I just really feel that, you know, with everything that's going on, the fact that it's a very fluid document, in fact, that just looking at 2021 as an example of how quickly things can change.
So I'm going to go to Ms. Bowers and then Ms. Angela.
Joanne, could you revise a revenue projection taking into consideration the projects that are pending before Planning Commission and the additional revenue that's anticipated from those projects? And also, I don't think that you built in the work from home tax revenue as well, that I think is being projected. So if you could revise your revenue projections as well, because your revenue is a projection.
Correct.
And so your revenue could also change by 1.2 million.
Absolutely, as it did in 2021. We are expecting it to decrease, and instead we had an increase. We expected to decrease by 10%. We ended up with an increase of 5%, projecting it through the end of the year. So just as our expenditures can change, so can our revenues.
And would that still be in line with best practices? Are you able to do a revenue projection revised, still in line with finance best practices?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I guess to go with that, on the inflation part, because what was considered to be something that was just going to be very short, it is now going to be longer, and it's been in the news now for at least a month, if not longer. So can we put a little, you know, double inflation in there to make sure that we would have enough money to do what we need to do?
Well, that would just be associated with our materials and supplies and our capital projections. So we could absolutely just build in a flat percentage.
That would be
But to go
great.
back and reevaluate every single thing, we just don't have the time for that.
Conservative is the best we can be at this point with that. If it then melts away, and we're praying for that, obviously, I would feel more comfortable with everything myself, but
Yeah,
it's just me.
we already had some inflation built in. I have to
I know
go
you
back
had
and
some
look
in,
at the
but-
notes and see what was included. I think we were right around 3% at the time. But yeah, we could definitely go back and add a
It's-
couple more
it's much higher
percentages to
now.
materials and supplies. I still don't think it's going to outweigh what we're seeing on the revenue revision side.
That sounds hopeful. Thank you.
I'll just add that the largest expenditure is salaries and benefits, which are contractually
Right, which isn't going
determined,
to
so.
be impacted because we're not keeping up with inflation
Right.
with our employees' increases.
I'm not sure we're any closer to an answer here. While I appreciate the request to have the finance department update their revenue figures, I don't know that's going to get us something that's passable in a week. I also do want to, for the sake of their time and understanding bandwidth here, try and center on a single ask as opposed to 5 different iterations of the budget. So again, I'll just ask my colleagues here, is there any appetite for some sort of middle ground here? You know, what I'm hearing is, it seems like the goalposts are $2 million reduction, or we're fine with what's being presented. Is 1 million passable?
Well, as I mentioned, you're still spending 200,000
Potentially.
based on the estimates. Still spending 200,000 out of the unencumbered balance. According to the forecast.
Using $200,000 of fund balance is what you're referring to, yep.
1.2.
And so I guess with that being said, there was 3.15 added to fund balance in 2020. Joanne's currently projecting something north of 665 in fiscal 2021. You don't think using 200 of that is reasonable?
Based on the projections of capital investment are being asked of this community or expected of the community, and the funding resources that will be available. Yes, I understand there's a capital fund. Totally understand that. It's not going to cover $100 million for 4 buildings on top of everything else that needs to be done.
Well, it depends on how it's financed.
Hold on.
It could have the capacity.
Excuse me. To spend without a modicum of savings between capital and operations on the first near normal budget since we've received $8 million plus in addition into our revenue stream would seem to be rather short-sighted. I can't support that.
Is flat amenable?
First budget.
Let me ask, is flat amenable?
You mean 1 point?
Meaning basically zero use of fund balance.
There needs, from my perspective, I'm just one person here. There needs to be, on this budget, a modicum of capture of savings on capital and on operations. Capital is a long-term effort. There are a large number of very expensive projects that are on the deck that either are expected or desired or needed based on the age of facilities, based on expectations of the community, and the ability to fund those within the funding streams that we have today aren't possible if the very first budget out of the gate doesn't put money aside for a long-term picture and plan.
Mr. Leesburg?
To Mr. Lurik's point, I mean, if we've got
Can't hear
potential. To Mr. Lurik's point, if we've got $100 million of proposed improvements to buildings, that kind of thing, I don't want to see it stretched out like our sidewalk program that's going to take 15 years to get there. You and I, on our very first day, saw the building over at Oklahoma that needed to be fixed, that still hasn't been fixed. I've got one more meeting on this council, and that building still has not been fixed. We went to the people, we told them that we needed money to fix things and to do projects. I see $800,000 in increased salaries and benefits and contract services. In one department, I see $1.4 million increase in salaries and benefits and contract services in another. And I understand it takes people to do these projects. I understand that. But I've got $2.2 million in increased salaries and benefits and contract services in 2 departments. Sounds like we've got a lot of people, to Ms. Bowers, we've got a lot of people, but we're not getting a lot of things built, and that's what the people are paying for. They don't care how many people are in this building. They want to see, they don't care how many people are in this building. They want to see projects. They want their road paved, Mr. Schnetzer. They've told you that time and time again. They want sidewalks built. We've heard that time and time again. And we hear that we don't have the staff to run this, so we're just going to pay somebody else in perpetuity. With Mr. Renner, that was not acceptable to him. He wants them to learn how to do it so we don't have to pay $700,000 in contract services. We've got more engineering staff than we've ever had, and we've paid more for studies the last couple of years than ever. I understand you need people to run projects, and the increase in projects, dictate it, but so.
Madam Mayor?
If I might, we do indeed need the people. We had the largest street program ever last year, this past year, and it almost killed our public service and engineering staff. We're proposing an even larger program next year because that's what the people expect. That's what we told the issue $12 were going to be used for, streets and sidewalks. We are implementing a brand-new sidewalk program that was initiated by this council that we worked on and put for a year and got into effect this year. We are just getting ready to send resident letters out in the next, 2 weeks? Is it 2 weeks? That program in and of itself is going to require an inordinate amount of staff time. We've had over $180 million of development projects this year that have gone through Planning Commission and through the Development Department, which is more than the last 4 years combined. That takes engineering review, it takes public service, it takes project inspectors, it takes a whole slew of people in order to continue to move these projects forward. There were, I think, a 4-year period where our unclassified workers went without a pay raise when this city was lean on dollars. And as a result, we have people who have been here for years who are vastly underpaid right now. We're losing people, and that is not a badge of honor. When we sit here and we talk about people, oh, so-and-so used to work here and they went here and now they're here, that is not a badge of honor. We heard the Clemens consultant sit here and say we have the largest turnover out of municipalities in the central Ohio area, and he said that is not a good thing. We're losing valuable people. We have to invest in the people in order to carry out the projects that we have promised them we would do. There's got to be a balance in this somewhere. And I appreciate Councilwoman Bauer, your point on that, because we do have to make that investment, and the issues and the requests that are in the budget this year are indeed laying the foundation to be able to do the work long-term that we have promised the people we were going to do. It is the resident taxpayer dollars. We do have to be cognizant of how we're spending that. We have a finance director who has been recognized by council multiple times for how wonderful she is. She's won how many awards? I don't even know. And we just won another award for the first time we've won it in the past decade for the way we handle our finances and how well managed we are. But when we sit here and she talks to you, you don't want to listen to her. So I'm trying to understand the balance between that.
I take exception to that. Of course we want to talk to her because we know how good she is.
Right.
Okay? So that's pretty much putting something on our backs that is not true, because I have the most respect for her.
I know you do, Councilwoman. We've had that conversation.
I know we
I
have.
also know that Joanne, what we go through in this budget process, when this budget comes together, is multifaceted and multi-stepped. I know it's been walked through for many times. The directors are asked to put together their budgets. Director Vollmer sat with them one-on-one, asked them for their 5-year projections, challenged everything that was in their budget, from staffing requests down to contract services and professional services. After that was done, the directors submitted their budget to Director Burry. Director Burry, Director Vollmer, and I then again met with each department director and did the same exact thing. Why is this being requested? Do you really need this? Can this wait until next year? How does this fit within Go Forward Gahanna? What is this going to accomplish? Are there any additional costs that are going to be associated with this if we move forward with this? All of those questions are asked and vetted before it ever gets finalized and put into a budget book and presented to you. So I do appreciate the feedback, and we want to work with you and come to a budget that you are comfortable with, but I also don't want to have the appearance created that somehow we just put a bunch of things on paper and it's a wish list. It comes through with very thorough and thoughtful consideration and evaluation and challenges, recognizing that we are underestimating our revenue and overestimating our expenses so that we can be fiscally responsible in how we approach the work of this city.
So I want to get back to the objective here is to walk out of this room or conclude this meeting with a number. Madam McGregor, not to put you on the spot, but I think you had said now's maybe not a good time. Would you be all right with the administration coming back with the revised revenue figures that our finance director has talked about and essentially a flat budget that does not use general fund balance or is not projected to use general fund balance in 2022?
Now what?
You think that'd be okay?
Say it again.
Would that be okay?
No, say it again.
So Joanne had mentioned that right now she's projecting more than this increase of $665,752 to the fund balance in this fiscal year. Is that correct, Joanne? Did I hear you correctly?
No, I was moving into the 2022 budget.
Okay, right.
So what I've already adjusted revenue for what I projected out for 2021. That's why we're north of the 665,000 rather than using the 1.8 million that we had originally planned. So I've already adjusted my 2021 revenue based on projecting out to the end of the year. I think what Mrs. Bowers was referring to is the fact that I planned on 0% for 2022, but since we have put this projection together, there's been some significant movement, I believe, on the economic development side. I believe that we're going to see some increase in there just based on the development that's coming into the city.
So based on your professional opinion, the forecasted 2022 income tax is going to be something north of 19 million that's currently in the budget book, correct?
I believe so, but I'll work with planning and development to see if we could work through those scenarios, how quickly some of these things could come online, because that's really what it comes down to. We have the projects, but in their best estimate, when do they see these coming online? When do they see those salary increases kind of hitting? So I need their expertise in knowing when those projects are going to kind of start and when we could actually see some positive momentum from them.
So Mrs. McGregor, using that as a predicate, would you be amenable to a budget that this net change in fund balance on page 40 for 2022, instead of minus 1.2 million, is 0?
Yes.
Yes?
And that was a question I had, was I know that there's a lot of development things going on, but how quickly will that affect the revenues? You know, I mean, I know there's a lot of things coming.
Right. That's what I have to work with them to see
Right.
how they see those projects
Right.
progressing and when we see those kind of wage increases realistically coming into play.
Michael?
I was just going to say, I would second that. I would be okay with that.
I'm good
Mrs.
with
Andrew?
that because I think we have a really good economic development department now that is going to really come through with, I mean, they've already done more than what had been done for many, many years. So I think we have that as a positive. Again, inflation is still there, and I'm concerned about what is happening to everything. And conservative is always good. But I honestly trust what's going on here in terms of economic development, because we've never seen it go that fast. I have not seen it go that fast.
Can I say one?
And I guess we have Mr. Strum to thank for that.
And Jennifer Six. A lot
Yeah,
of
yes,
these
and Jennifer
projects
Six.
started last year, too.
Just want to go down to the end. I think we have essentially 3 folks are asking for revised revenue and basically a no use of fund balance. Mr. Renner, are you amenable to that?
I'm amenable to the adjustment of whatever projections that Joanne wants to say, yes. I'm not amenable to cutting anything out of the current budget, but
Somehow all makes itself come in together
it
anyway.
may rectify itself. I understand my colleagues' stand on principle, but I think the picture that's been not really understood or seen very well is from a larger view of what has been happening with this administration. And I don't know. I believe in this mayor. I love the activity that we've seen. I believe in the staff. I love the activity that we've seen in the projections. We're going forward. I already pointed out that revenue's going up at the end of the day. What's not to like?
Let me ask this, Mr. Renner. And this is piggybacking off of something that or a statement that Mr. Larrick had said. Let's say we ask the administration for basically a neutral budget with the revised revenue projections. Those other items, as they come forward in calendar year 2022, can ultimately be supplementally appropriated as Mr. Strum and his fine work begins to materialize. Would that be a path forward?
Yeah, I'm open to discussing it.
I want to close this meeting with direction to the administration.
I'm not going to be able to give you anything more than that. I'm really not. Sorry. I'm open to discussing it.
Mr. Leesburg, are you okay with basically a flat budget in the GF for 2022?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Larrick, I think.
Don't need me.
Yep, your preference is 2 million. Ms. Bowers?
I'm comfortable with the budget as it is right now. I think that my hope is that with revenue projections edited, maybe that use of the unreserved fund balance would decrease, but I understand that we need to preserve and protect our human capital, so I'm fully aware of comfortable with what the budget looks like right now.
What I'm hearing is that at least a majority is asking for next Monday's Finance Committee meeting to come back with revised projections for the general fund showing some of the, I guess, progress that's being made on the economic development front, but also for expenditures to reflect a zero use of fund balance at this moment. Is that, you guys have the bandwidth to produce that? Okay. Thus, anything further?
No, I mean, I'll work with
Okay.
the development planning, get those revenue projections updated, and then see where we land.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
Just because this is like a long marathon, this is not a sprint. I don't feel like we have to have, I mean, last year we had the biggest road project ever. I don't feel we have to have a bigger one this year. I mean, it would be nice, but I mean, I think we need to pace ourselves to make sure we're staying within the rest of
Just slightly bigger.
Just so, I mean,
I'll just throw this out there.
Everything doesn't have to be done right away, okay? That's what I guess.
And just so you know, it's not expected, I believe, Director Crawford, it is not expected to stay at this rate for the next 6 years? Is that, yes?
Okay.
Is that what I understood this to be? Yes.
I think also with the infrastructure stuff coming through from the federal government, with the possibilities of many grants, that's the only thing that I can come up, that's really happened good, was that infrastructure frame was there, and it is absolutely going to bring a lot of
this year, but
money into this particular area.
not long.
Anything else from council on this topic? No?
Don't pack
Is
up,
the
Karen.
administration
This has
clear?
been long, and
The administration clear on the ask? Yes? Okay. All right. Thus concludes finance. Thank you.
At this time, would ask to reconvene regular meeting of City Council for the purpose of returning to executive session. We'll do a motion. I don't believe it's necessary, but we'll go ahead and do that. Is there a motion to go to reconvene? Is there a second? Second by, moved by Mr. Leesburg, second by Mr. Renner. Any discussion? Roll call?
Leesburg?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
Lyric?
Yes.
McGregor?
Yes.
Schnetzer?
Yes.
Angelou?
yes.
Bowers?
Yes?
Motion carries. This is a council initiative. I don't expect there to be any legislative action out of this executive session. By all means, if you wish to stay, you may do so. Otherwise, thank you for coming.